The day my own son stood in court and calmly told the judge I was losing my mind. I thought the deepest wound would come from hearing those words. I was wrong. The real shock came minutes later when my attorney quietly pressed a button and my own trembling voicemail filled the silent courtroom. My son's face drained of color before a single sentence had finished playing. In that moment, everyone finally understood who had truly been lying and why he had worked so hard to convince my family that I couldn't be trusted. If you've ever been hurt by someone you loved most, I'd love to hear your story. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe if family stories like mine speak to your heart, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Reading your messages reminds me that none of us has to face these battles alone. Before all of this happened, before lawyers and courtrooms and whispered accusations, my life was quiet in a way I had learned to appreciate. My name is Amanda White, and for 38 years I lived in the same little house on Maple Ridge Drive in Columbus, Ohio. It was not a grand house. It had pale blue shutters, a narrow front porch, and an old maple tree in the yard that my husband planted the year our son was born. In the spring, that tree dropped tiny green buds all over the walkway. In the fall, it covered the grass with red leaves so bright they looked painted. My husband Charles used to complain about raking them. Someday he would say, leaning on the rake with that crooked grin of his, "This tree is going to bury me alive." And I would answer, "Not before you finish the yard." Those were the kinds of memories that lived inside my walls. Not expensive furniture, not fancy decorations, just years. Laughter in the kitchen, Christmas mornings, birthday cakes, arguments that ended before bedtime. My son's height marked in pencil on the laundry room doorframe. My husband's old work boots still sitting on a shelf in the garage because I never had the heart to throw them away. After Charles passed, people kept telling me I should sell the house and move somewhere smaller. "You don't need all that space, Amanda. It's too much for one woman. You should be closer to family." But the house was not just space to me. It was proof that I had survived the worst loss of my life and still managed to wake up each morning, make coffee, water my flowers, pay my bills, and keep living. I had worked nearly 30 years as a school secretary at Franklin Elementary. I was not rich, but I was careful. Charles had been careful too. We paid off the mortgage before he retired. We had a small savings account, a pension, and a life insurance policy that I never touched unless I truly needed to. I clipped coupons, drove the same Toyota for 12 years, and still balanced my checkbook every Sunday after church. That was who I was. Reliable, organized, practical. So when my son Jason began treating me like a fragile old woman who could not remember where she put her own purse, it did not happen all at once. It started so gently that at first I mistook it for concern. Jason was my only child. He was 42 then, tall like his father, with the same square jaw and dark blonde hair that had started thinning at the temples. He worked in real estate development, though I never fully understood what that meant. He always sounded busy, always taking calls, always rushing from one meeting to another. After Charles died, Jason visited more often for a while. He would come by on Sunday afternoons with his wife Lisa and sometimes their daughter Emily. Lisa was polished in a way I never was. Perfect nails, smooth hair, soft cardigans, and a voice that always sounded sweet even when the words weren't. Emily, though, was different. She was 21 studying nursing at Ohio State and still hugged me like she meant it. She would curl up on my sofa, eat my lemon cookies, and ask me stories about her grandfather. I loved that girl more than I can explain. For a while, those visits felt like a blessing. Jason fixed the loose handle on my back door. He changed the batteries in my smoke detectors. He carried heavy bags of mulch from the trunk to the garden. I remember standing in the kitchen one afternoon, watching him tighten a cabinet hinge, thinking Charles would have been proud. Then the questions began. "Mom, where do you keep the deed to the house I was rinsing coffee cups at the sink when he asked it the first time?" "In the fireproof box," I said. "Why?" "No reason. Just making sure everything's organized." I dried my hands on a towel and looked at him. "Everything is organized." He smiled quickly. "I know, Mom. I'm just trying to help." The next week, he asked about my bank accounts. "Do you still use First Ohio Credit Union?" "Yes." "Do you have online access?" "I don't need online access. I go in person." He gave Lisa a look across the table. It was quick, but I saw it. Lisa reached over and patted my hand. "Amanda, you know a lot of scams target seniors. It might be safer if Jason helped monitor things." I smiled politely and pulled my hand back. "I've managed my own money since before Jason was born." Lisa laughed softly as if I had made a charming little joke. "Of course, nobody is saying you can't." But that was exactly what they were beginning to say. Not directly, not yet. A few days later, Jason called and asked whether I had updated my will after Charles died. I told him Robert Hayes had handled everything years ago and there was nothing complicated. The house and assets would eventually go to him with a small education fund I had already set aside for Emily. There was a silence on the line. "How much is in Emily's fund?" he asked. "That's between me and Emily." His tone changed then. Not angry exactly, but tight. "Mom, I'm her father. And I'm her grandmother." He laughed, but it had no warmth in it. "You're getting stubborn in your old age." I should have heard the warning in that sentence. I should have understood that he was not teasing. He was testing how far he could push. But mothers have a terrible habit of explaining away the first signs of cruelty in their children. We remember them as babies. We remember Fever's first steps, scraped knees, school plays. We remember holding them when they cried, and some foolish part of us believes that child is still hidden inside the adult standing in front of us. So I told myself Jason was stressed. I told myself Lisa was just practical. I told myself they were worried because I was alone. Then one Saturday morning, Jason came over without calling. I was in the dining room sorting papers for tax season. Receipts, insurance statements, bank forms all stacked neatly in folders the way I had done for decades. He walked in with 2 coffees and that bright salesman smile. "Thought I'd surprise you. I was happy to see him at first." "That's nice, honey. Put yours on the coaster." He glanced down at the table. "Doing paperwork, taxes." He set the coffee down and began looking at the folders. Not casually. Not like a son curious about his Mother's Day, like a man inspecting inventory. I closed one folder slowly. "Jason, what I don't like people going through my papers." His face softened instantly. Too instantly. "Mom, I'm not people." "No," I said. "You're my son, which is why you should respect me enough to ask." For a moment, something hard passed behind his eyes. Then he lifted both hands and smiled. "Fair enough." But he did not leave the table. Instead, he sat across from me and leaned forward. "Mom, Lisa and I have been talking." Those words made my stomach tighten. "We think it might be time to simplify things for you. Bills, accounts, insurance, house maintenance. It's a lot. You shouldn't have to carry all of that. I'm not carrying anything I can't handle. I know you think that." I stared at him. "I don't think it. I know it." He sighed the way adults sigh at difficult children. That was the first time I realized my son had started speaking to me as if I were beneath him. "All I'm saying," he continued, "is maybe we should put my name on some things, just in case. On what things? The house, maybe. One account. Emergency access." "No." The word came out calm but firm. Jason blinked. "No. Your father and I worked for what we had. I am not adding anyone's name to my house or my bank account because of some vague just in case." His jaw tightened. "You don't trust me." That question hurt because it was designed to hurt. I looked at my son, my only child, sitting in the chair where Charles used to drink coffee every morning. I wanted to say, "Of course I trust you." I wanted to make the sadness in his eyes disappear. But something deeper, older, wiser inside me whispered, "Be careful." So I said, "Trust is not the issue. Independence is." He stood up then, pushing the chair back a little too hard. "You know, Mom, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're becoming defensive over simple things." My face warmed. A man asks to put his name on my house, and I'm defensive for saying, "No, I'm your son. And I'm still the owner of this house." The room went silent. Outside, the maple leaves scraped against the window in the wind. Jason looked around the dining room at the old china cabinet, the framed family photos, the lace runner I had washed by hand for years. Then he said something I would not forget. "Dad would have wanted me to make sure you didn't make mistakes." It felt like he had reached across the table and slapped me. "Don't use your father's name to pressure me," I said quietly. His expression changed again. The softness returned. The fake concern. The careful voice. "Mom, I'm not pressuring you. I'm worried." But I had finally begun to understand that his worry always pointed in one direction. My signature, my accounts, my house. After he left, I sat alone at the dining room table for a long time. The coffee he brought had gone cold. My tax papers were still stacked neatly, but my hands trembled when I touched them. For the first time since Charles died, my house did not feel completely safe. That evening, Lisa called. Her voice was gentle, almost sorrowful. "Amanda, Jason came home very upset. I'm sorry to hear that. He feels like you're shutting him out." I told him I didn't want to put his name on my property. Lisa paused. "You know he only wants to protect you. I can protect myself." Another pause. Then she said softly, "Sometimes people don't notice when they're starting to struggle." I gripped the phone tighter. "What does that mean?" "It doesn't mean anything bad. We just love you. That's all." But when she hung up, I did not feel loved. I felt watched. The following week, Jason began calling more often. Not to ask how I was feeling, not to share news, not to invite me to dinner. He called to check whether I had paid the electric bill, whether I had taken my medication, whether I remembered Emily's birthday dinner, whether I knew what day the trash went out. Questions I had known the answers to for years suddenly sounded like tests, and every test had a hidden purpose. At church, Carol Bennett, Charles's older sister, touched my arm and said, "Amanda, Jason told me you've been a little overwhelmed lately." I forced a smile. Did he? He's a good son. Let him help. That was when I realized he had started telling other people, not enough to alarm me openly, just enough to plant seeds. A little forgetful, a little stubborn, a little overwhelmed. Aging can be cruel that way. Once someone suggests your mind is slipping, every normal mistake becomes evidence. Misplace your glasses and people exchange looks. Forget one name and they lower their voices. Get angry and they call it confusion. But I was not confused. I was afraid. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. At first, Jason's comments were small enough that I could pretend they did not matter. That is how manipulation often begins. Not with a shout, not with a slammed door, not with some dramatic betrayal you can point to and say, "There, that was the moment." It begins with little things said in gentle voices. It begins with people smiling while they take 1 inch of your dignity at a time. The first time I noticed Jason correcting me in front of someone else, we were at Carol Bennett's house for Sunday lunch. Carol was my late husband's older sister, and even though she had always been a little bossy, I cared for her. She had known Charles since he was a boy. After he died, she became one of the few people who could mention his name without making me feel like I was breaking in half. Carol had made pot roast that day. Her dining room smelled like onions, carrots, and old wood polish. Jason and Lisa sat across from me, Emily beside me, quietly pushing peas around her plate while the adults talked. Carol asked if I was still volunteering at the church pantry on Thursdays. Every other Thursday, I said. This week I'm going in at 9. Jason gave a little chuckle. I looked at him. What? Nothing, Mom. It's just Wednesday this week. I paused. No, honey, pantry day is Thursday. Lisa lowered her eyes to her plate, but I saw the tiny smile at the corner of her mouth. Jason tilted his head in that patient way he had started using. The church changed it. Remember, you told me that. No, I said slowly. They changed the clothing drive to Wednesday. The pantry is still Thursday. Carol looked from Jason to me, uncertain. Jason reached across the table and touched my wrist. Okay, Mom. Maybe I misunderstood. But his tone told everyone he had not misunderstood at all. His tone said, "See what I mean?" Heat rose in my cheeks. I wanted to pull my hand away, but I knew if I did, I would look irritated. An irritation I was beginning to learn was becoming Jason's favorite evidence. Emily spoke up softly. Grandma's right. I drove by the church last Thursday and saw the pantry sign. Jason's eyes flicked to her. The moment passed, but it left something behind. A seed. A week later, he planted another one. He called me on a Tuesday evening while I was folding laundry. Mom, did you pay your water bill? Yes. You're sure? I frowned at the towels in my lap. Of course I'm sure, because Lisa said you mentioned being confused about a bill. I asked her why the city added a stormwater fee. That is not confusion. I'm not accusing you. You keep saying that right before you accuse me. He sighed. Mom, please don't get defensive. That word again, defensive. It became a little hook he could hang anything on. If I disagreed, I was defensive. If I explained, I was defensive. If I stayed quiet, I was withdrawn. If I cried, I was unstable. After that, Jason began showing up with strange little tests disguised as kindness. He would walk into my kitchen and ask, "Did you take your blood pressure pill today?" If I said yes, he would ask, "What color is it?" If I said I had an appointment, he would ask, "Are you sure that's the right date?" If I told a story, he would interrupt with, "Mom, you already told us that." Sometimes I had told it before. I was 68 years old. I repeated a story now and then. So did everyone I knew. But when Jason said it, he did not say it like a son gently teasing his mother. He said it like a man building a file. Lisa played her part more quietly. She never openly attacked me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she became tender in a way that felt like a blanket being pulled over my face. "Amanda," she would say, "why don't you let me drive you to the grocery store? I can drive myself. I know, but parking lots are stressful." Or, "Amanda, maybe you should write things down more often." "I already do." "That's wonderful. That's exactly what memory specialists recommend." Memory specialists. She said little phrases like that, then watched to see if I caught them. One afternoon, I came into the living room and found Lisa standing near my mantel, holding one of Charles's framed photographs. It was from our 25th anniversary. He was wearing a navy suit, and I had on a cream dress I had saved 3 months to buy. "Beautiful picture," Lisa said. "Yes," I replied. It was a good night. She set it down, then glanced at the hallway. Amanda, where do you keep your emergency contacts in my address book? Maybe Jason should have a copy. He has my doctor's number. I mean, legal contacts, bank contacts, insurance. I looked at her carefully. Why would Jason need all that? Her face softened. Because when something happens suddenly, families scramble. When something happens, I repeated. She smiled sadly. We just want to be prepared. Prepared for what I wanted to ask. My death, my weakness, my removal. Instead, I said, I'm prepared. The smile stayed on her face, but her eyes cooled. Of course, that was another thing I learned during those weeks. People can smile and threaten you at the same time. The first real mistake I made happened at the pharmacy. It was a rainy Friday, and I had stopped at Walgreens after leaving the library. My knee had been aching from the damp weather, and I was tired. I picked up my blood pressure medication and a birthday card for Emily, then reached into my purse and realized my wallet was not there. My heart jumped. I checked the side pocket. The zipper pouch, the bottom of the purse, nothing. The young cashier waited politely. I'm sorry, I said. I must have left my wallet at home. It happens. People forget wallets. Young people forget wallets. Tired people forget wallets. Busy people forget wallets. But when I got home, Jason's car was in my driveway. He stepped out before I had even turned off the engine. Mom, the pharmacy called me. I stared at him through the windshield. Apparently, Lisa had once added Jason as an emergency contact on a form after picking up a prescription for me months earlier. I had not thought anything of it then. Now it felt like a trap I had walked into barefoot. Jason opened my car door. Are you okay? I forgot my wallet. I'm not injured. He helped me out even though I did not need help. You shouldn't be driving around without money or ID. I didn't do it on purpose. That's not the point. I pushed past him toward the house. The point is, I made a normal mistake. He followed me inside. Mom, this isn't the first thing. I stopped in the entryway. What does that mean? He looked genuinely sad for a second, and that almost broke me. It means we're noticing a pattern. We, Lisa and I. Carol, too. There it was. Carol, too. My throat tightened. You've been discussing me. We've been worried about you. You've been discussing me. He looked away. Later that night, Carol called. Her voice was gentle but heavy, the way people speak when they have already decided you are fragile. Amanda, sweetheart. Jason told me about the pharmacy. Of course he did. Don't be angry. He loves you. I forgot my wallet, Carol. I know, but with everything else. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. What everything else? She hesitated. The confusion about church, the bills, getting upset when Jason tries to help. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the shape of his plan was becoming clear. He was not proving I was losing my mind. He was making a list and teaching people how to read it. Every ordinary moment was being arranged into a pattern that did not exist until Jason named it. After we hung up, I walked through the house turning on lights even though it was not dark yet. The kitchen light, the hallway lamp, the small stained glass lamp in the living room that Charles bought me from a flea market in Dayton. I needed the house bright. I needed to see everything clearly. 2 days later, I found out Lisa had been recording me. It happened during Emily's visit. She had come over after class wearing her nursing school sweatshirt and carrying coffee for both of us. I knew something was wrong the moment she walked in because she hugged me too long. Grandma, she said, can I ask you something without you getting upset? That depends on the question. She looked toward the front window, then back at me. Did Dad and Mom ask you about assisted living? My stomach dropped. No. Emily's face changed. They said they did. I held the coffee cup with both hands. When last night, Dad said they gently brought it up and you got paranoid and accused them of trying to steal your house. I closed my eyes. I had accused no one of stealing anything. I had asked Lisa why Jason needed my bank contacts. That was all. Emily sat beside me on the sofa. Grandma, Mom has videos. I opened my eyes. Videos. She showed Aunt Carol one. You were in the kitchen and you looked upset. Mom said you were having an episode. The room seemed to tilt. Then I remembered. Lisa had been holding her phone the day she asked about legal contacts. I thought she was checking a message. Maybe she had only recorded the part after I became upset. Maybe she had caught my voice rising, my hand trembling, my face flushed with anger. Not the question that caused it. Not her pushing. Just me reacting. That is the cruel genius of people like Lisa. They do not need to invent your emotions. They only need to remove the reason for them. What did the video show? I asked. Emily swallowed. You saying I'm prepared, and then asking why Jason needed your information. Mom told everyone you were suspicious for no reason. I stood up because sitting still suddenly felt impossible. Emily reached for my hand. I don't think you're confused. Those words nearly made me cry. I'm not, I whispered. I know. But knowing was not the same as proving. That evening after Emily left, I did something I had never done before. I took a small spiral notebook from the drawer beside the telephone. It had a blue cover and pages lined in pale gray. I sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light and wrote the date at the top. Then I wrote everything. Jason asked about deed. Jason asked about bank accounts. Lisa asked for legal contacts. Jason told Carol I was overwhelmed. Lisa recorded me without permission. I wrote slowly, carefully, like the school secretary I had once been. Names, dates, times, exact words when I could remember them. My hand ached by the third page, but I kept writing, because I understood something now. My son was not simply worried, he was preparing. And if Jason White was building a story to take my voice away, then I needed to build the truth before no one could hear me anymore. The family dinner, where everything changed, happened on a cold Sunday evening in late November. Carol had invited everyone to her house after church. She said it was just a simple meal before the holidays got too busy, but the moment I walked through her front door, I felt something waiting for me. Not a person, not a surprise, a mood. The house smelled of roasted chicken and cinnamon candles. The dining table was already set with Carol's good plates, the ones with blue flowers around the edges. Jason and Lisa were in the living room, standing close together near the fireplace. Lisa stopped talking the moment she saw me. Jason gave me one of those careful smiles that had stopped reaching his eyes. Emily came over quickly and hugged me. Hi, Grandma. I held on to her for half a second longer than usual. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered. Are you okay? Before I could answer, Jason appeared beside us. Mom, he said brightly, you made it. I looked at him. Of course I made it. I've driven to Carol's house for 30 years. His smile tightened. I only meant with the weather. The weather was clear. That was how he did it. One little comment, one little suggestion that a normal thing had become impressive for me. Driving across town, paying a bill, remembering a date, cooking a meal. Every ordinary act was slowly being turned into a test I was expected to fail. At dinner, I tried to stay calm. Carol sat at the head of the table. Her son Mark and his wife Susan were there too, along with Jason, Lisa, Emily, and me. It should have felt familiar. It should have been the kind of family gathering where people passed roles, talked about Thanksgiving plans, and argued about football. Instead, the air felt rehearsed. For the first 20 minutes, everyone made polite conversation. Mark talked about work. Susan complained about grocery prices. Carol asked Emily about nursing school. I listened, answered when spoken to, and kept my hands folded in my lap so no one would notice they were trembling. Then Lisa said, Amanda did. Jason tell you we found that senior living community near Worthington? My fork paused halfway to my plate. No, I said. He did not. Jason gave Lisa a quick glance as if she had spoken too soon. Carol looked at me with that soft, pitying expression I had begun to hate. It's supposed to be very nice, Amanda. Not a nursing home. More like apartments with help nearby. I have an apartment, I said quietly. It's called my house. Mark chuckled awkwardly, but no one else did. Jason set down his water glass. Mom, nobody is saying you have to move tomorrow. Then why are we discussing it at dinner? Lisa reached for my arm, but I moved just enough that her hand landed on the table instead. Amanda, she said gently, we only want you safe. There it is again, I said. Safe. Jason leaned back in his chair and sighed. This is exactly why I didn't want to bring it up like this. I looked at him. Then why did you? His face hardened for just a second. Then the concerned son returned. Because I don't know how else to make you hear me. The table went silent. I could feel every set of eyes on me. Carol watching with worry. Mark uncomfortable. Susan pretending to study her napkin. Emily tense beside me. Lisa calm, almost satisfied. Jason folded his hands on the table. Mom, he said we've all noticed things. My stomach dropped. All I repeated. He did not answer directly. You've been forgetting appointments, misplacing things, getting suspicious over simple questions. You've been more emotional, more defensive. I felt my face burn. I am emotional because my son is discussing my life behind my back. That's not fair. No, Jason, what's not fair is sitting me down at a family dinner and acting like I'm a problem to be solved. Carol spoke softly. Amanda, honey, no one thinks you're a problem. I turned to her. Then why does everyone look at me like I've already disappeared? Carol's eyes filled with tears, and suddenly I looked like the cruel one. That was the trap. If I stayed quiet, Jason's story stood unchallenged. If I defended myself, I became difficult. If I cried, I became unstable. If I got angry, I became proof. Jason pushed his chair back slightly and lowered his voice the way a man does when he wants to sound reasonable. Mom, last week, you forgot your wallet at the pharmacy. People forget wallets. You accused Lisa of trying to get your legal information because she asked for it. Lisa's mouth parted as if wounded. Amanda, I asked because I care. You asked where I keep bank contacts, insurance contacts, legal contacts. Jason held up one hand. See, this is what I mean. You hear concern and turn it into an attack. Emily suddenly spoke. Dad, Grandma has a right to ask why you need those things. Jason looked at her sharply. Emily, stay out of this. She's allowed to talk, I said. And you're allowing her to think we're the enemy. Jason snapped. There it was. The mask slipped just enough for everyone to see irritation underneath, but only for a moment. Then he inhaled, softened his face, and looked at the others. I'm sorry. This has been hard on all of us. All of us. As if his campaign against me had been a burden he bravely carried. I stared at my plate. The chicken had gone cold. I could hear the old wall clock ticking in Carol's hallway. I remembered sitting at that same table years ago with Charles beside me, his knee touching mine under the table, his hand finding mine whenever family talk became too loud. But Charles was gone. And Jason knew it. He knew there was no husband beside me to say, that's enough, don't speak to your mother that way. He knew he could wrap control in concern and people would believe him because he was the son and I was the aging widow. Then he said the words that split something open inside me. I think it may be time for me to take a more formal role in helping Mom make decisions. I lifted my head slowly. What does that mean? He looked at Carol first, not me. That told me everything. It means I've talked to someone about guardianship. The words seemed to echo against the walls. Guardianship. For a moment, I could not breathe. Emily whispered, Dad. Lisa lowered her eyes again. Carol pressed her hand to her chest. Jason, you said you were only asking questions. I am asking questions, he said. Legal questions, responsible questions. I pushed my chair back and stood. My knees felt weak, but my voice came out clear. You are not becoming my guardian. Jason stood too. Mom, please don't make a scene. A scene, I said. You just told this table you want legal control over my life because I'm trying to protect you. No, you are trying to control me. The words landed hard. Lisa gasped softly. Carol whispered my name like a warning. Mark shifted in his chair. Jason's face flushed. Do you hear yourself? Yes, I said. For the first time in weeks, I hear myself very clearly. He stepped toward me. This paranoia is exactly what I'm talking about. That word hit me like ice water. Paranoia, not fear, not anger, not betrayal. Paranoia. He was giving my pain a diagnosis. Emily stood up then. Her chair scraped loudly across the floor. Stop it, Dad. Jason turned on her. Sit down. No, she said, and her voice shook. Grandma isn't crazy. No one moved. For one beautiful, painful second, I was not completely alone. Jason stared at his daughter as if she had slapped him. You don't understand what's going on, he said. I understand enough. Lisa reached for Emily. Sweetheart, your father is under a lot of stress. Emily pulled away. Because Grandma won't give him her house. The room went still. Jason's eyes flashed. I looked at Emily. She looked terrified as if the words had escaped before she meant to release them. What did you say? I asked. Jason answered before she could. That is ridiculous. But his voice had changed. Too fast. Too loud. Emily swallowed and sat down slowly, regret and fear all over her face. I knew then she had heard something. Maybe not everything, but enough. Carol looked confused. Jason. He shook his head with a wounded laugh. This is what I mean. Mom's suspicion is spreading. Now Emily thinks I want the house. I never said that, I said. You didn't have to. He looked around the table again, gathering sympathy. I have tried to handle this privately. I have tried to be respectful. But Mom is getting worse, and if we all keep pretending she's fine, something bad is going to happen. I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked up my purse. I am going home. Jason moved toward me. I'll drive you. No. Mom, you're upset. I am upset. I am not incapable. He lowered his voice. Please don't prove my point. That almost broke me, not because I believed him, but because everyone else might. I turned to Carol. Thank you for dinner. Her eyes were wet. Amanda, maybe you should let Jason... No, I said. Just one word. Quiet. Final. I walked to the front door with Emily behind me. On the porch, she grabbed my hand. Grandma, I'm sorry. I looked at her young face, pale with fear and guilt. What did you hear, Emily? She glanced back toward the house. Not now, she whispered. But Dad already has papers. I saw them on his desk. The cold air seemed to pass straight through my coat. What kind of papers? Her eyes filled with tears. I think he's already filed something, or he's about to. Behind us, the front door opened. Jason stood there, framed by warm light, wearing the expression of a son worried about his poor, confused mother. But I saw him clearly now. Not as the little boy I had raised, not as Charles's son, as a man who had made a plan. And that night, driving home with both hands gripping the steering wheel, I understood that my family had not gathered for dinner. They had gathered for my surrender. The next morning, I woke with the strange heaviness that comes after a night when you do not truly sleep. My body had rested in pieces, but my mind had stayed awake, replaying every word from Carol's dining room. Guardianship. Formal role. We've all noticed things. Each sentence circled me like a bird waiting for something to die. I made coffee, but I forgot to drink it. I toasted one slice of bread, then stood at the kitchen counter staring at it until it went cold. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. Charles used to say, mornings made problems smaller. That morning, everything felt larger. At 9:30, Jason called. I let the phone ring 4 times before answering. Mom, he said too gently. How are you feeling? That question did not sound like love anymore. It sounded like documentation. I'm fine. You left pretty upset last night. You announced to the family that you want guardianship over me. He sighed. That's not exactly what I said. It is exactly what you said. Mom, I don't want to argue. Then stop doing things worth arguing about. There was a pause. I could almost see him standing somewhere with one hand on his hip, rubbing his forehead like I was exhausting him. I made an appointment for you, he said. My fingers tightened around the phone. With whom? Dr. Miller. My primary doctor. Yes. Tomorrow morning at 10. I didn't ask you to make an appointment. I know. But after last night, I think it's important. Important for whom? For you, Mom. No, I said. For your paperwork. His voice sharpened. Do you hear how suspicious you sound? There it was again. He would push me, then name my reaction as illness. I will go, I said carefully, but I will speak for myself. Of course, he said it too quickly. The next morning, Jason picked me up even though I told him I could drive. He arrived 15 minutes early and walked into my house without knocking, using the spare key I had once given him after Charles died. That small sound, the lock turning before I invited him in, made my stomach clench. You ready? He called. I came from the bedroom with my purse and coat. You could knock. He looked surprised. Mom, it's me. Yes, I said. And this is still my house. He smiled in that tired way. Let's not start the day like this. I wanted to tell him he had started it the moment he let himself in, but I saved my energy. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Jason kept glancing at me as if he expected me to forget where we were going. I watched the city pass by outside the window. Bare trees, gray sidewalks, people rushing into coffee shops with collars turned up against the wind. At Dr. Miller's office, Jason walked to the reception desk before I could. She's here for a cognitive concern appointment, he told the receptionist. My face burned. The young woman looked at me, then back at him. Name, Amanda White, I said before he could answer. Jason placed a hand lightly on my back. To anyone watching, it probably looked supportive. To me, it felt like possession. When the nurse called my name, Jason stood with me. I can go in alone, I said. He gave a soft laugh. Mom. The nurse hesitated, sensing the tension. I looked at her. I would like to begin alone. For the first time that morning, Jason's pleasant expression cracked. Mom, I'm here to help explain. I can explain my own body. The nurse smiled professionally. That's perfectly fine. Mr. White, we can call you in later if Mrs. White wants. Mrs. White. The title steadied me. I had been Mrs. White long before Jason had become the man trying to shrink me. Inside the exam room, the nurse took my blood pressure. It was higher than normal. Of course it was. A person cannot be calmly dragged toward the edge of losing her independence. Any dizziness, she asked. No. Any recent falls? No. Any confusion? I looked at her. No. But my son would like everyone to believe otherwise. Her pen paused. I regretted saying it immediately. It sounded exactly like what Jason wanted me to sound like, suspicious, defensive, emotional. So I inhaled and softened my voice. I'm sorry, this has been stressful. She nodded kindly, but I could not tell what she was writing. When Dr. Miller came in, he greeted me warmly. He was in his early 50s with silver at his temples and a calm manner I had always trusted. I had seen him for years. He knew my medical history. He knew I managed my blood pressure, arthritis, and cholesterol without trouble. Amanda, he said, sitting on the stool. How are you? I'm worried. That's honest. My son thinks I'm losing my mind. Dr. Miller's expression stayed neutral. Tell me what's been happening. So I did. I told him Jason had been asking about my deed bank accounts and will. I told him Lisa had recorded me without explaining why. I told him about the family dinner and the word guardianship. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked a series of questions. What day was it? Who was the president? Could I remember 3 words after a few minutes? Could I draw the face of a clock? Could I count backward by 7s? I did all of it. Not perfectly graceful, maybe. My hand shook a little when I drew the clock, and I stumbled once while counting backward. But I was not confused. I knew where I was. I knew why I was there. I knew what was being done to me. After the questions, Dr. Miller leaned back. I don't see evidence today that you lack capacity, he said. Relief moved through me so quickly I almost cried. Then he added, but family concerns can be complicated. With your permission, I'd like to hear what Jason has observed. The relief vanished. I wanted to say no. I wanted to keep Jason out of that room, away from my chart, away from any more chances to twist my life into symptoms. But I also knew refusing would become another mark against me. So I said, fine. The nurse brought him in. Jason entered with the grave expression of a man visiting someone in intensive care. Thank you, doctor, he said, sitting beside me. This has been very hard. Dr. Miller asked, what concerns have you noticed? Jason opened a small folder. A folder? My son had brought a folder to my doctor's appointment. He removed a sheet of paper and began reading. Recent forgetfulness. Left wallet at pharmacy. Confused church schedule. Increasing paranoia about family motives. Emotional outbursts. Resistance to assistance. Possible financial vulnerability. Each phrase landed like a stone on my chest. Financial vulnerability, I repeated. Jason turned to me gently. Mom, please. Dr. Miller looked at him. Can you give specific examples? Jason nodded. She refuses online banking, which makes monitoring difficult. She became angry when Lisa asked for emergency contact information. She has accused us of wanting her house. I did not accuse you until you started acting like you wanted it, I said. Jason looked at the doctor sadly. This is what I mean. I realized then how skilled he had become. He did not need to raise his voice. He only needed me to raise mine. So I folded my hands together and looked at Dr. Miller. My son asked to put his name on my house and one of my accounts. I refused. Since then, he has told relatives I'm confused. Jason's jaw tightened. Dr. Miller made a note. The sound of his pen against paper made my skin crawl. Notes could become records. Records could become evidence. Evidence could become a cage. Jason continued. I'm not trying to take anything. I'm trying to prevent a crisis. What crisis? I asked. He turned to me. The one you won't admit is coming. I stared at him, and for a moment, grief overtook anger. This was my child, the baby I had rocked through ear infections, the boy whose lunch I packed, the teenager I stayed up waiting for when he missed curfew. And now he sat in a doctor's office, calmly building a case against me. Dr. Miller finally closed the chart. I don't see enough here to support a medical declaration of incapacity, he said. Jason's face flickered. But Dr. Miller continued. I will document the family concerns and recommend follow-up if symptoms progress. Symptoms. I knew he was trying to be careful. I knew doctors had to document what families reported. But the word felt like betrayal anyway. When we left, Jason was quiet until we reached the car. Then he said, You made that harder than it needed to be. I turned to him in the parking lot. You brought a folder. I'm organized. No, you're prepared. His eyes narrowed. Maybe someone has to be. On the drive home, I looked straight ahead and said nothing. I could feel him waiting for me to cry, argue, accuse anything he could use. So I gave him nothing. But inside, I was shaking. When we reached my house, he followed me to the door. I think I should hold on to the spare key for now, he said. You already have the spare key. I mean, I don't think you should change locks or do anything impulsive. I slowly turned. Why would I change the locks? His silence answered before his mouth did. Because he knew he had crossed a line. Because he knew I had noticed. I'm tired, I said. Please leave. Mom, leave Jason. For once he did. The moment his car pulled away, I locked the door, walked to the kitchen, and took out my blue notebook. My hand shook so badly I had to wait before writing. Doctor appointment. Jason described false symptoms, brought folder, used words. Paranoia, emotional outbursts, financial vulnerability. Dr. Miller said no evidence today that I lack capacity. Follow-up only. I underlined that sentence twice. Then I sat back and stared at the notebook. It was no longer just a record, it was a lifeline. That night, while looking for an old insurance form, I opened the bottom drawer of Charles's desk and found a business card tucked inside a file labeled Estate Documents. Robert Hayes, attorney at law. The name pulled me backward in time. Robert had handled Charles's will and helped me after the funeral when I could barely understand what papers I was signing. He had been kind, precise, patient. I held the card under the desk lamp, my thumb resting over the raised black letters. For the first time in days, I felt something besides fear. Not safety, not yet, but direction. Jason had doctor's folders and whispered conversations. I still had my mind. I still had my voice. And maybe if I was brave enough to use it, I still had someone who would listen before my son convinced the world I was no longer worth hearing. I did not call Robert Hayes right away. For nearly an hour, I sat at Charles's old desk with the business card in my hand, turning it over and over between my fingers. The edges had softened with age. The white paper had yellowed slightly, but the black lettering was still clear. Robert Hayes, attorney at law, estate planning, probate, elder law, elder law. Years ago, that phrase would not have meant much to me. It would have sounded like something for other people. Older people, frailer people, people whose families had become complicated in ways mine never would. I had been wrong about many things, but nothing humbled me more than realizing I had been wrong about my own son. The desk still smelled faintly of Charles's pipe tobacco, even though he had quit smoking long before he passed. I opened the top drawer and found his old fountain pen, a pair of reading glasses, a stack of envelopes tied with a rubber band. Touching those things made me feel both stronger and lonelier. Charles would have known what to do, I thought. Then another thought answered back. No, Amanda. Charles would have wanted you to know what to do. That was the difference between love and control. Love prepared you to stand. Control waited until you stumbled. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady when I dialed the number on the card, but by the third ring, my pulse was beating in my throat. A woman answered. Hayes and Whitman Law Offices. This is Diane. How may I help you? I swallowed. Hello. My name is Amanda White. Robert Hayes handled my late husband's estate several years ago. I need to speak with him if possible. Of course, Mrs. White. Let me check his schedule. There was soft music while I waited. I stared at the framed photograph on the desk, Charles standing beside me in front of the maple tree, one arm around my shoulders. Both of us younger than I felt I had ever been. Diane returned. Mrs. White. Mr. Hayes is in court this morning and then has client appointments through late afternoon. Is this urgent? I looked toward the front window. Outside the street was quiet. A delivery truck rolled past. Mrs. Linda Parker from next door was bringing in her trash bin. Everything looked normal, and that made what was happening inside my life feel even more unreal. Yes, I said. I believe it is. Would you like to leave a voicemail directly for him? I hesitated. Part of me wanted a live person. I wanted Robert himself to hear my voice and tell me I was not being dramatic. I wanted immediate protection, a clear instruction, someone to say, Amanda, here is what we do next. But Diane was waiting, and I could not ask the world to pause just because my son was trying to take over my life. Yes, I said. Please transfer me. The line clicked. Then Robert's recorded voice came on, older than I remembered, but still calm. You've reached Robert Hayes. I'm unable to take your call at the moment. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message, and I'll return your call as soon as possible. The beep sounded. For 1 second, my mind went blank. Then everything came out. Mr. Hayes, this is Amanda White. My husband was Charles White. You handled his will and the house documents after he passed. I'm sorry to leave this on a message, but I don't know who else to call. My voice trembled, and I hated that. I pressed my palm flat against the desk and forced myself to speak slower. My son Jason White has been telling relatives that I am losing my mind. He has asked about putting his name on my house and my bank account. I refused. Since then, he and his wife Lisa have been telling people I'm forgetful and paranoid. Yesterday, he took me to Dr. Miller and brought a folder of things he claims prove I'm declining. I stopped to breathe. The house creaked softly around me. I am not confused. Today is Wednesday, November 29th. It is 11:16 in the morning. I am in my home at 214 Maple Ridge Drive in Columbus. I know exactly what is happening. Jason mentioned guardianship at a family dinner on Sunday. I believe he is trying to gain legal control over me and my property. My throat tightened. I'm scared, Mr. Hayes, not because I don't understand. Because I do. There was a noise from outside. A car door. I froze. Through the thin curtain by the front window, I saw Jason's black SUV pulling up to the curb. My mouth went dry. Oh, God, I whispered. Then I remembered the voicemail was still recording. I lowered my voice. Jason just arrived. I didn't know he was coming. Please call me back. Please don't call my son. My number is... Before I could finish, the front door opened. He used the key again. Mom, Jason called. I panicked and ended the call without knowing whether I had given Robert my full number. My heart hammered as I shoved the business card under the edge of Charles's desk blotter. Jason walked into the room wearing a charcoal coat and an expression that tried to look casual. "What are you doing in here?" he asked. I stood too quickly. "This is my desk. It was Dad's desk, and now it is mine." His eyes moved to the phone in my hand. "Who were you talking to?" "No one." The word came out too fast. His face changed. "Mom, I made a call." "To whom?" "That's private." He stepped farther into the room. The office suddenly felt smaller, crowded by his height, his coat, his suspicion. "Private calls are fine," he said, but his tone said the opposite. "I'm just asking because after yesterday I think we need to be careful about who you're talking to." Careful. There are people who take advantage of seniors. I almost laughed. "Yes, Jason, I'm beginning to understand that." His jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't need you walking into my house whenever you please." He glanced toward the hallway. "You gave me a key." "For emergencies. This is an emergency." "No," I said. "This is you checking on me because you're afraid I called someone." For the first time, I saw real alarm in his eyes. "Did you?" I did not answer. He looked past me at the desk at the files at the phone. His gaze landed on the bottom drawer still slightly open from when I had found Robert's card. He moved toward it. I stepped in front of him. "Do not go through your father's desk, our family desk, my house, my desk, my papers." His face flushed. "You're making everything a fight. You are making everything a threat." He stared at me, breathing hard through his nose. Then his voice dropped. "Mom, I'm trying very hard not to take stronger steps." The room went silent. There it was. Not concern, not love, a warning. "What stronger steps?" I asked. He looked away, but it was too late. I felt my fear sharpen into something clearer. "Have you already spoken to a lawyer?" I asked. He turned back. "I've spoken to professionals." "What professionals?" "People who understand these situations." "These situations?" I repeated. "You mean mothers who say no?" His eyes hardened. "I mean aging parents who refuse help until they hurt themselves or lose everything." "I have lost nothing." "Not yet." The words hung between us. Not yet. I knew then that Jason did not see my home as my life. He saw it as a future asset at risk of slipping out of his reach. I moved to the office door. "Leave. Mom, leave now or I will call someone who can remove you." His expression shifted from anger to shock. "You would call the police on your own son." "If my own son refuses to leave my house, yes." For a moment he looked at me as if I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe the mother he expected, the one who softened when he sounded hurt, the one who confused obedience with love, was finally disappearing. But that did not mean I was losing my mind. It meant I was finding my spine. Jason walked to the front door, but before leaving he turned. "You're proving my point more every day." "No, Jason," I said. "I'm proving mine." He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I stood there until his SUV pulled away. Then I locked the door, slid the chain into place, and returned to Charles's desk. My knees gave out before I reached the chair. I lowered myself, slowly shaking all over. The voicemail. Had Robert received enough? Had I said enough before Jason came in? Had the fear in my voice made me sound unstable? Or would someone finally hear the truth beneath it? I picked up the phone and checked the call log. The call had lasted 1 minute and 58 seconds. Not long, but long enough maybe. I wrote everything in my blue notebook. Called Robert Hayes. Left voicemail. Stated date, time, address, Jason's behavior, guardianship threat. Jason entered house without knocking using spare key. Asked who I called. Tried to inspect desk. Warned he may take stronger steps. Then I underlined stronger steps 3 times. That afternoon, I put the notebook in a place Jason would never think to look inside the old sewing basket beneath a folded stack of quilt squares. Jason had never paid attention to anything domestic unless he thought it had resale value. At 5:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it, afraid it might be Jason using another phone. Then I answered. "Hello, Mrs. White." "This is Robert Hayes." My breath caught. "I received your message," he said. His voice was calm but serious. "Are you alone right now?" "Yes." "Are you safe?" I looked at the locked front door, the chain the chair I had pushed beneath the knob like something from a movie. For the moment, I said. He paused. "Mrs. White. I saved your voicemail." I closed my eyes. Those 5 words were the first solid ground I had felt in weeks. He continued. "I want you to listen carefully. Do not sign anything your son gives you. Do not give him access to financial records. Do not discuss legal strategy with him. Start gathering documents quietly, and keep writing everything down." "I already am." "Good," he said. "That may matter more than you know." My voice broke. "Mr. Hayes, he's my son." "I understand." "No," I whispered. "I don't think anyone can understand how that feels." Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said gently, Maybe not. But I understand what coercion looks like. And from what you described, we need to take this seriously. Coercion, not confusion, not paranoia. Coercion. For the first time, someone had named what was happening to me without making me the problem. Robert scheduled an appointment for 2 days later. He told me to bring my estate documents, bank statements, medical summary, and any notes I had made. Before hanging up, he repeated one instruction. "Mrs. White, be careful. Who knows you called me?" After we hung up, I sat in the quiet office and cried. Not loudly, not helplessly, just enough to let the fear leave my body for a moment. Then I wiped my face, stood up, and went to the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, older than she had a month ago. Her eyes were red, her mouth drawn tight, but she did not look lost. She looked wounded. And wounded people, I reminded myself, are not the same as weak people. Somewhere in Jason's world, he believed he was already steps ahead of me. He had family whispers, doctor notes, maybe even legal forms waiting in a folder. But now I had Robert Hayes. I had my notebook. And whether Jason knew it or not, I had left a voicemail that captured the beginning of the truth. After I spoke with Robert Hayes, I believed the worst of my fear would ease. It did not. Knowing the truth does not always make danger feel smaller. Sometimes it makes every sound louder. Every car slowing outside my house made me look through the curtain. Every phone call made my stomach tighten. Every creak in the hallway reminded me that Jason still had a key, and worse, he still believed he had the right to use it. The very next morning, I called a locksmith. His name was Earl, a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard and a tool belt that jingled when he walked. I told him I had lost track of who had copies of my house key, which was not exactly a lie. I had lost track of who my son thought he was. Earl changed the front and back locks in less than an hour. The sound of his drill was rough and loud, but to me, it sounded like protection. When he handed me the new keys, I closed my fingers around them and felt something settle inside me. For the first time in weeks, Jason could not simply walk in. That small victory lasted until noon. My phone rang while I was making tomato soup. Jason's name appeared on the screen. I considered not answering, but Robert had told me to document everything, and part of documenting was knowing what was being said. "Hello?" "Did you change the locks?" Jason asked. No greeting, no softness, just accusation. I stirred the soup slowly. "Yes." Silence. Then, why? "Because you entered my home without permission. I have a key for emergencies. You used it because you wanted to know who I called." His voice lowered. "Mom, you are making dangerous choices. Changing my own locks is not dangerous. It is when your family needs access in case something happens. If something happens, call 911. He exhaled sharply. "This is exactly what I warned everyone about." "Everyone!" He did not answer. A chill passed through me that had nothing to do with the weather. "Who is everyone?" "Jason, I'm not doing this with you." "No. You prefer doing it around me." He hung up. I stood in the kitchen with the wooden spoon still in my hand, listening to the deadline. Then I wrote it down in my notebook. Jason called at 12:08 p.m. Angry that locks changed. Said I am making dangerous choices. Said he warned everyone. Everyone. That word became a shadow over the next few days. Carol stopped calling me directly and began leaving careful messages. "Amanda, sweetheart, just checking in. Please call me when you feel up to it. When you feel up to it. Not when you get a chance, not when you're home. When you feel up to it," as if speaking on the phone had become a burden beyond my ability. At church, people looked at me differently. Not everyone. But enough. Mrs. Dalton from the choir squeezed my hand and said, "You're so brave still coming out." Still coming out. As if I had escaped from a hospital bed. Even my neighbor, Linda Parker, noticed. One afternoon, she came over carrying banana bread wrapped in foil. Linda was 72, sharp as a tack, and not the kind of woman who accepted nonsense with a smile. She had lived next door for 15 years and knew exactly how I trimmed my roses when I put out the trash and how often I forgot things, which was no more than anyone else. She sat at my kitchen table, looked at me over her glasses, and said, "Amanda, why did your son tell me not to worry if you say strange things?" My hand froze on the coffee pot. "He said that he caught me by the mailbox yesterday. Told me you'd been under stress and might be confused about family matters." I sat down slowly. Linda's mouth tightened. "I didn't like it. What did you say I said? I've known you long enough to tell stress from nonsense." For the second time since Robert's call, I nearly cried from relief. "Thank you," I whispered. Linda reached across the table and touched my hand. "Honey, I don't know what's going on, but I know when a grown man is laying groundwork." Laying groundwork. That was exactly what Jason was doing. One neighbor, one relative, one doctor, one whispered concern at a time. He was building a world where my words would arrive already doubted. The next day, a letter came from First Ohio Credit Union. It confirmed that someone had attempted to access information about my savings account through phone verification, but had failed because they could not provide the correct security answer. My hands went cold. I sat at the dining table and read the letter 3 times. The attempt had happened 2 days earlier at 3:42 p.m. I knew where I had been at 3:42 p.m. I had been at the grocery store buying apples and chicken thighs. I called the credit union immediately. A representative named Marcy confirmed that a male caller had claimed to be assisting his elderly mother with her accounts. He had my full name, address, date of birth, and partial account information, but failed the security question. What was the question I asked? Name of first pet, she said. I almost smiled despite my fear. Jason would never have known the answer. Our first family pet was not the golden retriever he grew up with. It was a stubborn little black cat named Pepper that Charles and I had adopted before Jason was born. Can I add extra security, I asked. Absolutely. By the end of the call, I had added a verbal password, account alerts, and instructions that no information was to be released to anyone except me in person with identification. Then I called Robert's office. He was with a client, so I told Diane what had happened. She instructed me to bring the credit union letter to our appointment and to write down every detail of the call. I did. Credit union letter. Attempted access by male caller claiming to help elderly mother. Failed security question. Added protection. I placed the letter in a folder labeled Household Receipts, then tucked that folder beneath a stack of old appliance manuals. Jason would look for legal documents, not refrigerator warranties. By then, the house no longer felt like a home I simply lived in. It felt like a place I had to defend. Jason began appearing without appearing. That was the only way I can describe it. His car did not park in my driveway, but I would notice it passing slowly down the street. Lisa did not call, but Carol would repeat Lisa's phrases almost word for word. I stopped receiving certain pieces of mail, then found them. 3 days later, pushed halfway under the porch mat as if someone had taken them, looked at them, then returned them when they found nothing useful. One afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found it empty. That was strange because I was expecting a Medicare statement and a utility notice. I checked again after dinner and found both envelopes suddenly there, bent at the corners. I wrote that down too. Mail missing at 2 p.m. appeared by 6:30 p.m. envelopes bent. Could I prove Jason had touched them? No. But proof was not the same as truth, and the truth was beginning to circle my house like smoke. Then Emily came. It was just after sunset, and I was closing the curtains when I saw her small blue car pull into the driveway. She stepped out wearing a hoodie and jeans, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked over her shoulder before hurrying to the porch. When I opened the door, she slipped inside quickly. "Grandma, did Dad come here today?" "No." "Why?" She looked toward the hallway. "Can we sit?" We went to the kitchen. I made tea because I needed something to do with my hands and because fear is easier to face when water is boiling and cups are being set down. Emily did not touch hers. "I saw something," she said. My chest tightened. "What?" Dad had a folder open on his desk last night. I wasn't snooping. I went in to ask him about my car insurance and he closed it really fast. "What kind of folder?" She swallowed. "It had your name on it." I sat very still. Amanda White guardianship petition draft. The words seemed to remove all the air from the room. Draft. Petition. Guardianship. Robert had warned me, but hearing it from Emily made the threat stand up and take shape. Emily's eyes filled. "Grandma?" I didn't know what to do. "I'm scared of him being mad at me." I reached for her hand. "You don't have to fight him, but he's lying." "I know. He told Mom once, the court understands you can't manage things, the house can be handled quickly. He said it would be better to sell before the market shifts." The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead. For a moment, all I could hear was that word. Sell. Not protect. Not preserve. Sell. My house. Charles's house. The maple tree. The pencil marks on the laundry room doorframe. The porch where Emily had eaten popsicles as a child. The kitchen where I had spent half my marriage. Jason had already moved past whether he had the right to control it. In his mind, he was planning what to do after he won. Emily wiped her eyes. "I took a picture." She pulled out her phone and showed me. The image was slightly blurred, taken quickly, but clear enough. A file folder on Jason's desk. My name typed on a label. A printed page visible beneath it with the words, "Application for Appointment of Guardian." I covered my mouth. Emily whispered, "I'm sorry." "No," I said, though my voice shook. "You may have just helped save me." She looked so young then, younger than 21, torn between the father who raised her and the grandmother he was hurting. "You can't tell him I showed you." "I won't. He'll say I betrayed him." I squeezed her hand gently. Telling the truth is not betrayal, but I know it can feel like it when the liar is someone you love. She began to cry, then quietly, painfully. I moved around the table and held her the way I had when she was little. And while I comforted her, a new kind of grief opened inside me. Jason was not only hurting me, he was forcing his own daughter to choose between love and conscience. That night after Emily left, I called Robert's office and left another message with Diane. I did not say much, only that Jason had a guardianship petition draft and that Emily had seen it. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote until my fingers cramped. Emily visited. Saw Jason's folder labeled Guardianship Petition Draft. Photo exists. Jason discussed selling house quickly after court approval. Emily afraid. When I finished, I closed the notebook and pressed both palms flat against the cover. I had spent years believing family meant safety, but Jason was teaching me that sometimes family is the first place people learn where your locks are, where your papers are, what words will wound you, and how long it takes before you finally fight back. I looked around my kitchen at the old cabinets Charles had painted the curtains I had sewn myself, the refrigerator covered with Emily's childhood drawings I still could not throw away. Jason thought he was tightening the circle around me, but he had made one mistake. He believed I was only defending property. He did not understand that I was defending my name, my mind, and every year of life I had earned before he decided I was more useful, silent. Emily came back 2 days later, but this time she did not park in my driveway. She parked around the corner near the old brick house with the white fence, then walked quickly along the sidewalk with her hood pulled up. When I saw her through the front window, my heart broke a little. No granddaughter should have to sneak into her grandmother's house like she was doing something wrong. I opened the door before she knocked. "Come in, sweetheart." She stepped inside and looked behind her before I shut the door. Her cheeks were pink from the cold and her eyes had the tired look of someone much older than 21. "Dad thinks I'm at the library," she said. I locked the door. "You shouldn't have to lie for me." She gave a sad little laugh. "I'm not lying for you. I'm lying because he keeps asking where I go. That frightened me more than I wanted to show." We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had baked her birthday cakes, taught her how to roll pie crust, and let her drink hot chocolate out of the big Christmas mug even in July. Now she sat at my table like a witness carrying dangerous information. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Emily reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I printed this at school," she said. "I didn't want to email it." I unfolded it slowly. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between Jason and Lisa. "Lisa, if the judge grants it, how soon can we list the house, Jason? Depends on the order, but quickly if I'm guardian." "Lisa, what about Amanda refusing Jason? Once it's approved, refusal won't matter the same way." "Lisa, and Emily Jason. She'll get over it." My fingers went numb. She'll get over it. Not Amanda will be safe, not Mom will be cared for, not will do what's best for her. Refusal won't matter. I set the paper down because my hands had started to tremble. Emily watched my face. "Grandma, I'm sorry, you didn't write it," I said. "No, but he's my dad, and he's my son. That was the terrible bond between us. We were both being hurt by the same man, and both of us still loved the memory of who we thought he was." Emily wiped beneath one eye with her sleeve. "I keep thinking maybe I misunderstood," she whispered. "Maybe he thinks selling the house really would help you. Maybe he's just scared." I wanted to comfort her with a lie. I wanted to say that good people sometimes do bad things for confused reasons. And maybe that was true. But there comes a point when a person's motives matter less than their actions. "Emily," I said gently, "your father may tell himself he is helping me, but help does not require lies." She looked down. "Help does not require sneaking through someone's mail," I continued. "Help does not require telling a whole family that a woman is losing her mind because she said no." Her chin quivered. "I don't want to hate him," she said. "You don't have to hate him to tell the truth." That sentence seemed to settle between us. Emily took a long breath, then pulled out her phone. "I have more." She showed me photographs she had taken quickly, secretly, with the kind of shaky focus that proved she had been afraid. One image showed a yellow legal pad on Jason's desk with the words "Mom Assets" written at the top. Beneath it were short notes: house value, savings estimate, pension insurance, possible sale timeline. Another photograph showed a printed email from someone named Kevin Marsh, a real estate contact Jason worked with. The visible part said, "If this becomes available after court clearance, I can move fast." Older homes in that area are getting strong investor attention. Court clearance, investor attention. I felt something inside me harden. For weeks, Jason had wrapped everything in concern. He had used soft voices and phrases like safety, stress planning, protection. But these notes were not about my care. They were about my market value. Emily zoomed in on one picture. I don't know if this helps. It was Jason's calendar. On the screen, a meeting was listed for Monday at 3 p.m., probate consult guardianship filing. I stared at it until the words blurred. He hasn't filed yet, I whispered. I don't think so, Emily said. But he's close. Close. The word pushed me into motion. I stood and went to the sewing basket. Emily looked confused as I lifted the quilt squares and pulled out my blue notebook. What's that? She asked. My memory, I said. She frowned. Not because I lost it, I added. Because your father is trying to rewrite it. I showed her the pages. Dates, times, calls, words, the doctor appointment, the credit union letter, the missing mail, Jason walking into my house, the voicemail to Robert Hayes. Emily read quietly, her face changing as she turned each page. Grandma, she said, this is a lot. I know. No, I mean, this is detailed. Really detailed. That was my job for nearly 30 years. Records, attendance, incident reports, parent calls. I know how to document. For the first time that day, a tiny smile touched her face. Dad picked the wrong retired school secretary. I smiled too, though my eyes were wet. Yes, I said. He did. We spent the next hour making copies. Emily used a scanner app on her phone. I placed documents on the kitchen table, one by one, the credit union letter, my notes from Dr. Miller's appointment, the printed screenshots, the photographs from Jason's desk. Emily saved them in a hidden folder and then sent copies to a new email account she had created just for me. Don't use a password Dad could guess, she said. I won't. Not Grandpa's birthday, not your address, not my name. I was a school secretary, not a fool. She laughed softly, and for a moment we were grandmother and granddaughter again, not two women preparing for war inside a family. But the laughter did not last. Emily's phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it and went pale. Dad. Where are you, Dad? I called the library. Dad. Call me now. My stomach tightened. He called the library, I said. Emily stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. I have to go. No, wait, sit down, you're shaking. If I don't leave, he'll come here. The thought chilled both of us. I took her hands. Listen to me. You are not responsible for protecting me alone. But what if he files before Mr. Hayes can do anything? Then we answer it. We don't panic. We don't give him what he wants. She looked like she wanted to believe me. I walked her to the back door instead of the front, just in case Jason was already somewhere nearby. Before she left, she turned and hugged me hard. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. That was the truth. I would not insult her by pretending otherwise. But scared is not the same as helpless, I said. Emily nodded against my shoulder. After she left, I stood at the back window and watched her cut through the side yard toward the alley. My sweet Emily. The baby I had once rocked to sleep while Jason and Lisa went to dinner. The little girl who used to leave crayon drawings on my refrigerator. Now she was carrying evidence against her own father in her backpack. When she disappeared from view, I returned to the kitchen and gathered every paper we had touched. I placed the originals into a large brown envelope and wrote household recipes across the front. Then I slipped it behind an old cookbook on the pantry shelf. If Jason came searching, he would look in drawers, file cabinets, desk folders. He would never look behind church casserole recipes. That evening, Robert Hayes called. I received the documents Emily sent, he said. Mrs. White, these are important. My knees weakened with relief. So I'm not imagining it. No, he said firmly. You are not imagining it. Those words nearly undid me. He explained that if Jason filed a guardianship petition, we would need to respond quickly. He wanted me to schedule an independent cognitive evaluation, gather witnesses who saw me functioning normally, and avoid direct confrontation with Jason. Do not warn him about what we have, Robert said. I won't. And Mrs. White, yes, your granddaughter took a risk. Be careful with her too. After we hung up, I sat in the living room with only one lamp on. The house felt different now. Still threatened, but not silent. The truth had begun to move. It had left my notebook crossed into Robert's hands and found a witness in Emily. Jason thought he had isolated me. He was wrong. He had pushed too hard, lied too often, and underestimated the quiet love between a grandmother and a granddaughter. I looked at the framed photograph of Charles on the mantel. I'm trying, I whispered. And for the first time in many days, I imagined his answer. I know, Mandy. Keep going. So I did. The papers arrived on a Thursday morning. I remember that because Thursday used to be pantry day at church, and I had planned to go in for my usual shift. I had already packed my canvas tote with a sweater, a bottle of water, and the little notebook where I kept the names of families who preferred certain items. Mrs. Alvarez liked canned peaches. Mr. Jenkins needed low-sodium soup. A young mother named Kayla always asked if we had diapers. Ordinary things, human things, things that reminded me I was still useful in the world. Then the doorbell rang. A man in a dark jacket stood on my porch holding a large envelope. He asked Amanda White, "Yes." He handed me the envelope and said, "You've been served." For a moment I did not understand. Served sounded like something from television, something that happened to criminals or wealthy people fighting over businesses. Not to a widow standing in her own doorway wearing a cardigan and house slippers. Before I could ask anything, he turned and walked back to his car. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. I closed the door and stood in the entryway without moving. The house seemed to go still around me. Even the furnace had stopped humming. I knew what it was before I opened it. Still knowing a storm is coming does not make the first crack of thunder any less frightening. At the kitchen table, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the documents. The words blurred at first. Court of Common Pleas. Probate Division. Application for appointment of guardian. Jason Michael White applicant. Amanda Rose White proposed ward. Proposed ward. Not mother. Not homeowner. Not retired school secretary. Not widow of Charles White. Ward. A person to be managed. A person to be decided for. A person whose own voice had already been placed beneath someone else's. I sat down before my knees could fail me. Jason's petition said I was experiencing increasing cognitive decline. It claimed I was unable to manage financial matters, had become paranoid toward close family members, resisted necessary assistance, and was at risk of exploitation. He wrote that I had forgotten bills, confused dates, accused loved ones of theft, and made irrational decisions regarding home safety, including changing the locks to prevent family access. My hands shook as I read. Every act of self-protection had been turned into a symptom. Changing my locks meant paranoia. Refusing to give him bank access meant financial confusion. Asking why Lisa wanted my legal contacts meant suspicion. Crying after being cornered at dinner meant emotional instability. He had taken pieces of my fear, stripped away his own behavior, and offered the court a woman I barely recognized. At the bottom of one page, Jason had written a statement. I love my mother deeply. This petition is not about control, but protection. My only goal is to ensure she receives the care and oversight she needs before irreversible harm occurs. I stared at that sentence until my eyes burned. There are lies that shout, and there are lies that kneel with folded hands and pretend to pray. This was the second kind. I called Robert Hayes immediately. Diane answered, and the moment she heard my voice, she did not make me explain twice. Mrs. White, I'm putting you through. Robert came on the line less than a minute later. It arrived? He asked. Yes. Read me the hearing date. I turned pages with trembling fingers. December 18th, 9 o'clock. That gives us time. Time for what I asked, and my voice cracked. He's telling a court I can't be trusted with my own life, and we are going to show the court why he is wrong. I closed my eyes. Robert's calmness did not erase the fear, but it gave it walls, a place to stand inside. He told me not to call Jason, not to call Carol, not to defend myself over the phone to any relative who might repeat my words. He told me to bring the papers to his office that afternoon. I have pantry duty, I said automatically. There was a pause. Mrs. White, he said gently. You've just been served with a guardianship petition. I know. Do you still want to go to the pantry? I looked toward the tote bag by the door. And strangely, I did. Because Jason's petition said I was becoming useless, unreliable, incapable. And that morning, more than anything, I wanted to stand in a church basement and hand someone a can of peaches because I still knew how to show up. Yes, I said. I want to go for 1 hour. Then I'll come to your office. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, All right. Have someone there who can confirm you attended and functioned normally. I almost smiled. You mean a witness? I mean a witness. At the pantry, I told no one about the court papers. I checked names off a list. I sorted cereal boxes. I remembered that Mrs. Alvarez liked peaches and that Kayla's baby needed size 4 diapers. I smiled when people thanked me. I carried a bag to an elderly man's car, all ordinary, all evidence. At 11:30, Linda Parker picked me up and drove me to Robert's office. I had not asked her, but when I mentioned the papers, she put on her coat and said, You are not walking into a lawyer's office alone after your son pulled this nonsense. That was Linda. Robert's office was downtown in an old brick building with brass elevator doors and polished wooden floors. His receptionist, Diane, gave me tea in a paper cup and did not look at me with pity. I appreciated that more than she could have known. Robert Hayes came out himself. He was older than I remembered, with white hair now and deeper lines around his eyes, but his handshake was firm. He looked at me the way I had been desperate for someone to look at me, like I was a person, not a case. Not a problem, not a woman already half erased. Mrs. White, he said, Come in. Linda waited in the reception area while I followed him into his office. Bookshelves lined one wall. A framed photograph of his family sat on his desk. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. I handed him the petition. He read silently. Occasionally, his mouth tightened. Once he made a note in the margin. When he finished, he removed his glasses and looked at me. "This is aggressive," he said. My stomach sank. "Is it bad?" "It is serious, but serious does not mean successful." He opened a folder with my name on it. Inside were printed copies of the screenshots Emily had sent the credit union letter, my notes, and a transcript his assistant had begun preparing from my voicemail. Seeing my name on Robert's folder felt different than seeing it on Jason's. Jason's folder had been a cage. Robert's felt like a shield. "We will file an objection," he said. "We will request an independent evaluation. We will gather witness statements from Mrs. Parker people at your church, possibly Dr. Miller and anyone else who can speak to your daily functioning." "What about Emily?" Robert leaned back. "Emily may be important, but she is also his daughter. We should be careful before placing her directly in the center." "She already is in the center," I said softly. "He put her there." Robert's face softened. "Yes, he did." Then he asked me about the voicemail. He wanted to confirm details. The date, the call, Jason entering the house, what I said before the recording ended. "I was afraid I sounded hysterical," I admitted. "You sounded frightened," Robert said. "There is a difference. No one had said that to me before. Frightened, not unstable, not paranoid, frightened." He clicked a file on his computer and played the first few seconds of the voicemail. My own voice came through the speakers, thin and shaking. "Mr. Hayes, this is Amanda White. My husband was Charles White." I flinched. Robert stopped it immediately. "We don't have to listen now." "No," I said. "Play it." I needed to hear myself the way a stranger might hear me. The message continued. I heard myself state the date, time, address. I heard myself describe Jason asking for my deed and bank accounts. My voice trembled, yes, but my words were clear. Then, near the end, I heard the faint sound of a car door outside. Jason just arrived. I didn't know he was coming. "Please, call me back. Please, don't call my son." Then the recording ended. Robert looked at me carefully. "This voicemail matters," he said. "It shows you understood what was happening before the petition was filed. That undercuts his claim that your concerns are a later delusion." I held my tea with both hands. "Will the judge believe me? I can't promise what a judge will do," he said. "But I can promise this. Jason will not be the only voice in that courtroom." Those words stayed with me. Jason will not be the only voice. For weeks, he had tried to become the narrator of my life. He told Carol what my mistakes meant. He told Dr. Miller what my emotions meant. He told the court what my resistance meant. Now someone was finally saying I would get to speak too. Before I left, Robert gave me instructions. Keep routines, avoid confrontation, save every message. Do not sign anything. Do not let Jason into the house. If he came and refused to leave, call the police. That last instruction made me feel sick. A mother should not have to consider calling the police on her son, but a son should not try to turn his mother into a legal prisoner either. When Linda drove me home, she did not ask too many questions. She simply pulled into my driveway, put the car in park, and said, "You're going to win this." I looked at my house at the maple tree swaying bare-limbed in the winter wind. I don't know if winning is the word. Linda reached over and squeezed my arm. Then call it surviving. That night, I placed the court papers in a folder and wrote the hearing date on my calendar in red ink. December 18th, 9 o'clock. The day my son expected to stand before a judge and prove I was no longer fit to be myself. But Jason did not know about everything. He did not know Robert had saved my voicemail. He did not know Emily had taken pictures. He did not know my notebook was no longer just mine. And he did not know that the woman he thought he had cornered had spent her whole life keeping records. The days after I was served became a strange kind of preparation. I had always thought of legal battles as loud things full of dramatic confrontations and raised voices. But mine began quietly. It began with folders on my kitchen table, phone calls made in careful tones, copies of bank statements, lists of witnesses, and a growing understanding that truth does not defend itself unless someone is brave enough to organize it. Robert Hayes told me we needed more than my word. That hurt at first. Not because he said it cruelly. He didn't. He said it like a man who knew how courts worked. A judge would not simply look into my eyes, see my fear, and understand everything Jason had done. A judge would see documents, statements, evaluations, patterns. If Jason had built a case out of my ordinary mistakes, then Robert and I had to build one out of ordinary competence. So I began gathering proof of my own life. I collected paid utility bills from the past year. Every electric bill paid on time, every water bill, every insurance notice. I copied bank statements showing no overdrafts, no suspicious spending, no missed payments. I printed my church pantry schedule and asked Pastor Elaine to write a short statement confirming that I volunteered regularly, communicated clearly, and handled distribution lists without issue. I hated asking. There is a particular shame in having to prove you are still yourself. But Pastor Elaine did not make me feel ashamed. She invited me into her office after pantry duty, closed the door, and took both my hands. "Amanda," she said, "Jason called me last week." My stomach tightened. "What did he say?" "He said you might be confused and that if you made unusual claims about family conflict, we should contact him." I closed my eyes. Even church. Even there, he had tried to stand between me and my own voice. Pastor Elaine's fingers tightened around mine. I told him I do not report grown women to their sons. A laugh escaped me, sudden and wet with tears. She smiled. "Then I told him if he was worried about you, he should encourage you to bring concerns to trusted professionals, not ask people to monitor you behind your back." For the first time in days, I felt warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll write the statement," she said, "and if needed, I'll appear in court." That evening, I called Robert and told him. "Excellent," he said. "A pastor who sees you weekly is useful." Useful? It was a lawyer's word, but I understood what he meant. Linda Parker wrote a statement, too. Hers was 3 pages long because Linda had never used 10 words when 30 would do. She wrote that she saw me bring in groceries, manage yard work, attend appointments, receive mail, drive safely, and speak coherently. She also wrote that Jason had warned her not to believe me if I said strange things. Robert liked that part very much. "His attempt to preemptively discredit you matters," he said. I kept thinking about that phrase. Preemptively discredit. It sounded so clean, so legal, but what it meant was ugly. Jason had gone ahead of my truth and poisoned the ground before it arrived. Robert also scheduled an independent cognitive evaluation with a neuropsychologist named Dr. Helen Brooks. Her office was in a medical building near Riverside Hospital with wide windows and pale green walls. I was nervous the morning of the test, more nervous than I had been for any exam in school. What if I forgot something? What if anxiety made me stumble? What if one wrong answer became another weapon? Dr. Brooks was a calm woman in her 60s with silver hair and bright, intelligent eyes. Before the testing began, she said, "Mrs. White, this is not about perfection. No one performs perfectly. We are looking at patterns." Patterns. Jason had created false ones. I prayed mine would tell the truth. The evaluation lasted nearly 3 hours. Memory exercises, problem solving, word recall, drawing shapes, following instructions, questions about my daily life finances, medications, cooking, driving, relationships. At one point, Dr. Brooks asked, "Why do you believe your son filed for guardianship?" I looked down at my hands. "Because I said no," I answered. No to what? No to putting his name on my house. No to giving him control of my money. No to being treated like I was disappearing before I actually was. Dr. Brooks did not react emotionally. She only nodded and wrote something down. When it was over, I was exhausted. My head ached. My hands felt cold. But as I walked to the parking lot, I also felt proud. Not because I knew I had answered every question perfectly, but because I had shown up. Jason had expected me to fall apart. I did not. 2 days later, Robert called. "The preliminary results are favorable," he said. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Meaning. "Dr. Brooks does not see evidence that you lack capacity to manage your personal or financial affairs." I pressed one hand over my mouth. Robert continued. "We'll receive the full written report soon, but this is very helpful." Helpful. Useful. Favorable. Those were not emotional words, but to me they sounded like rescue bells. Meanwhile, Emily continued sending what she could, though Robert and I both urged caution. Jason had become suspicious. He questioned her more often, checked where she said she was going, and once asked to see her phone after she came home late from class. She refused. He shouted. She called me afterward from her car crying. "He said you're turning me against him," she said. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry. I told him he's doing that himself." I could hear traffic in the background, her shaky breathing, the turn signal clicking. "Emily, listen to me. Do not risk your safety for documents." "I'm not unsafe," she said quickly, but she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. That night, I told Robert I did not want Emily used unless absolutely necessary. "She's already carrying too much," I said. Robert paused. "I understand, but her evidence may be important." "She is more important than evidence." "I agree," he said gently. "We'll protect her as much as we can." Then came the discovery that changed Robert's tone completely. It started with an old account. Years earlier, after Charles died, Jason had helped me close one small joint household account that Charles and I had used for home repairs. At least I thought it had been closed. It held very little money, maybe a few $100s at the time, and I had not thought about it in years. Robert's assistant found a reference to it while reviewing my financial records. Mrs. White. Robert asked during a phone call, "Did you authorize Jason to access or transfer funds from a First Ohio joint maintenance account ending in 4412? No, I said. That account was supposed to be closed. It wasn't fully closed. My heart began to beat faster. What happened? There was an attempted transfer request 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. That was before the family dinner. Before the doctor appointment, before the petition. Jason had been moving before I even understood there was a war. How much, I asked. Not enough to devastate you, Robert said, but enough to show intent. More importantly, the request appears to have been made using outdated authorization tied to your husband's estate paperwork. I did not fully understand the legal meaning, but I understood the moral one. Jason had reached into the past into Charles's name, Charles's papers, Charles's trust, and tried to use it as a tool. Robert's voice was sharper than usual. This gives us another argument. Financial motive. Possible misuse of information. Will subpoena the records if necessary. Subpoena. That word frightened me, but it also steadied me. This was no longer only about whether I remembered appointments or misplaced wallets. Now there was a trail leading toward what Jason truly wanted. Money, access, control. The house. When I hung up, I went into the garage and stood before Charles's old workbench. His tools still hung on the pegboard, each outline traced in black marker, so he would know where everything belonged. Hammer, wrench, pliers, level. Charles had believed in putting things back where they belonged. Jason had taken our family and moved every piece out of place. Mother became ward. Concern became control. Refusal became illness. Greed became protection. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the cold smell of dust motor oil and old wood. Then I whispered, "I'm going to put it back." The next meeting at Robert's office felt different. I brought Linda's statement, Pastor Elaine's statement, my evaluation appointment confirmation bank documents, the credit union letter, Emily's screenshots, and my blue notebook. Robert spread everything across his conference table. For the first time, the evidence looked larger than Jason's lies. Robert tapped the voicemail transcript. "This remains one of the strongest pieces." I looked at the page at my own words typed cleanly in black ink. I know exactly what is happening. Those words made my throat ache. Robert said Jason's petition depends on the idea that your concerns are delusions caused by decline. But your voicemail was left before he filed, before you had court papers, before anyone could argue you invented this as a legal defense. You identified the behavior in real time. And the background, I asked. Robert's eyes lifted to mine. What background? I frowned. When Jason came in, I hung up quickly, but I thought maybe... Robert glanced at his computer. "We haven't enhanced the audio yet. I'll have someone review it more carefully." At the time, neither of us knew what that background sound would become. Neither of us knew it would one day fill a courtroom. Before I left, Robert gave me a printed copy of our response to Jason's petition. At the top, my name appeared again, Amanda Rose White, but this time beneath it the words were different. Objection to guardianship. It was only a legal document. Paper, ink, stapled pages. Still, when I held it, I felt something rise inside me that I had not felt since this began. Not comfort, not victory, defiance. Jason had asked the court to take my voice away, and now officially I had answered. No. The morning of the first hearing, I woke before the alarm. For a few moments, I lay in the dark and listened to the house breathe around me. The furnace clicked on. A branch brushed lightly against the bedroom window. Somewhere in the wall, an old pipe gave a faint knock, the kind of sound Charles used to say meant the house was stretching its bones. I turned my head toward his side of the bed. Empty, of course. It had been empty for years, but that morning the emptiness felt sharper. I missed his voice. I missed the weight of his hand over mine. I missed the way he could look at Jason when Jason was younger and say one word enough, and somehow the room would steady. But there was no Charles now. Only me. Amanda White, 68 years old, standing between my son and the life he wanted to take control of. I dressed carefully. Navy slacks, cream blouse, gray coat, small pearl earrings Charles had given me on our 30th anniversary. I did not want to look flashy. I did not want to look frail. I wanted to look like what I was, a woman who had paid bills, buried a husband, raised a child, kept a home, and still knew exactly who she was. My hands shook while I buttoned my blouse. That angered me at first. Then I remembered what Robert had said. You may be afraid. Fear is not incapacity. So I let my hands shake and kept buttoning. Linda drove me to the courthouse. She insisted. She wore a dark green coat and the expression of a woman prepared to scold a judge if necessary. I loved her for it. Robert met us outside the probate division entrance. He had a leather briefcase in one hand and a file tucked under his arm. His face was calm, but his eyes were alert. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I might throw up." "That's normal. I hope not in front of the judge." A small smile touched his mouth. "Let's avoid that if we can." Inside the courthouse smelled of floor-polished winter coats and old paper. People moved through the hallway speaking in low voices. Some looked angry, some frightened, some empty as if whatever brought them there had already worn them down. I wondered how many mothers had stood in that building because their children claimed to know what was best for them. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, a raised judge's desk, a flag in the corner, a court reporter seated near the front. Everything neat, official, and cold. Jason was already there. He sat with Lisa on one side of the aisle. He wore a dark suit and a blue tie, the same color tie he wore to Charles's funeral. That detail struck me so hard I had to look away. Lisa sat beside him in a soft beige coat, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, even though nothing had happened yet. Carol was behind them. So were Mark and Susan. A few other relatives sat nearby, faces tight with concern and curiosity. They did not come sit with me. Not one of them. That hurt more than I expected. Linda sat directly beside me, shoulder touching mine like a wall. Robert leaned close and whispered, "Remember, you don't need to convince everyone in this room. Only the court." I nodded. Then I saw Emily. She slipped in through the back door just before the hearing began. She paused, looking first at her father, then at me. Jason turned and saw her. His expression sharpened, warning her without a word. Emily's face went pale. Then she walked to my side of the courtroom. She did not sit in the front. She did not make a scene. She simply sat 2 benches behind me, but it was enough. I felt it like sunlight on my back. Jason saw it too. The judge entered a few minutes later. "All rise." Judge Patricia Coleman was a black woman in her late 50s with a composed face and silver-threaded hair pulled back neatly. Her presence changed the room instantly. Not harsh, but firm. A woman used to listening past performance. We sat. The clerk called the case, in the matter of Amanda Rose White application for appointment of guardian. Hearing my name spoken that way made my stomach twist. Jason's attorney stood first. His name was Mr. Whitaker, a polished man with a smooth voice and silver cufflinks. He began by saying this was a sad but necessary proceeding. Sad but necessary. I stared at the table in front of me and tried not to react. He described Jason as a devoted son facing the painful reality of his mother's decline. He said Jason had observed forgetfulness, confusion, increasing paranoia, resistance to help, and possible vulnerability to financial exploitation. He mentioned the pharmacy incident, the changed locks, my refusal to share emergency information, my uncharacteristic hostility toward family members. Uncharacteristic hostility. I had become a collection of phrases. Mr. Whitaker continued, Mr. White's goal is not to strip his mother of dignity, but to preserve it before her condition worsens. I felt Linda stiffen beside me. Robert placed one finger lightly on the table, a silent reminder, "Stay still." Then Jason was called to speak. My son stood and walked to the witness area with the solemn expression of a man carrying a holy burden. He swore to tell the truth. The truth. I almost laughed. Mr. Whitaker asked him gentle questions. "Can you describe your relationship with your mother?" Jason looked down briefly as if overcome. "We were always close, especially after my father died. I've tried to be there for her." "And when did you begin noticing concerns?" "About 6 months ago," he said. 6 months! That was a lie. 6 months ago, he had been asking about property values and whether I had updated my will. "She started repeating herself more," Jason said. "Forgetting appointments, getting confused about bills. She became suspicious of Lisa and me for no reason." "For no reason." I folded my hands tightly in my lap. He continued, "The hardest part is that she doesn't see it. She thinks we're trying to take something from her." Mr. Whitaker softened his voice. "Are you?" Jason turned slightly toward the judge. "No. I love my mother. I don't need anything from her. I just want her safe." There it was. The beautiful lie polished smooth. Mr. Whitaker asked about the house. Jason said he had only discussed selling it as a future possibility if Amanda needed assisted living or medical care. He said he wanted to preserve assets for my care, not benefit himself. Lisa was called next. She cried before the first question was finished. She spoke about how painful it was to watch me change. She said I had become suspicious when she asked basic safety questions. She said I accused her of wanting access to my money. She said I raised my voice in the kitchen and later denied what had happened. I started recording a few moments, she said tearfully, because I was worried doctors wouldn't understand how quickly she could become upset. Not because she wanted evidence. Not because she wanted to corner me. Because she was worried. Mr. Whitaker played a short video from her phone. There I was in my own kitchen, saying, "I am prepared," my voice sharp, my face tense. Then the clip ended. It did not show Lisa asking for my bank contacts. It did not show her pressing me. It did not show anything before my reaction. But to anyone who did not know, I looked exactly like what Jason wanted me to be. Angry, suspicious, difficult. Carol lowered her head. I felt the room shift. Robert stood for cross-examination. He did not attack Lisa. That surprised me. Instead, he asked quietly, "Mrs. White, how long was the full interaction before this clip began?" Lisa blinked. "I don't remember." "More than 10 seconds?" "Yes." "More than 1 minute?" "Possibly." "Did you ask Amanda where she kept legal insurance and bank contact information before this clip?" Lisa hesitated. Jason's shoulders tightened. "I may have asked about emergency contacts." "That wasn't my question," Robert said. Lisa's eyes flickered. "I don't recall exact wording." Robert nodded. "Yet you recorded Amanda's exact reaction." The courtroom went quiet. He did not need to say more. Then Robert turned to Jason. "Mr. White, you testified that your mother never sought legal advice before this petition because she did not understand the situation. Correct?" Jason sat straighter. "I said I wasn't aware of any. You suggested her resistance began after you filed correct yes. That's when it escalated." Robert picked up a paper. "Are you aware that your mother contacted my office before your petition was filed?" Jason's face changed for a fraction of a second. No. You were not aware? Or no, she did not. I wasn't aware. You entered her home on November 29th while she was on the phone, did you not?" Jason's jaw tightened. "I checked on her. Using a key after she had not invited you in, I had a key for emergencies." "What was the emergency?" Jason looked toward his attorney. Mr. Whitaker stood. "Objection. Argumentative." Judge Coleman said, "Sustained." "Rephrase." Robert nodded. "Mr. White, what urgent condition required you to enter your mother's home that day?" Jason swallowed. "I was concerned. About what? Her state of mind?" "Before seeing or speaking with her that day," Jason's face flushed slightly. "It was an ongoing concern." Robert let the silence sit. Then he said, "No further questions at this time." At this time. Those words told me he was holding something back. The voicemail. Not yet. I understood then what he had meant when he said evidence had to be used at the right moment. The judge asked me a few questions directly. "Mrs. White, do you understand why you're here today?" I stood, though my knees felt weak. "Yes, Your Honor. My son is asking the court to give him control over decisions I can still make myself." "Do you believe you need a guardian?" "No, Your Honor." "Do you receive help from anyone?" "I receive help the way many widows do. My neighbor drives me sometimes. My pastor helps with church matters. My granddaughter helps with technology. But needing help is not the same as needing to be owned." The last word came out before I could stop it. Owned. The courtroom went still. Judge Coleman looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You may sit." I could not read her face. When the hearing ended for the day, no final decision was made. More evidence would be reviewed. Another session would follow. Robert said that was normal. But normal did not make it easy. As we stood to leave, Jason approached me in the aisle. His face was tight, but his voice was soft enough for others to hear. "Mom, I hope you know I'm doing this because I love you." I looked at him. For a moment I saw the little boy he had been. Mud on his sneakers, cookie crumbs on his chin, crying because he fell off his bike, calling me mommy in a voice that could undo me. Then I saw the man in front of me, using love as a leash. "No, Jason," I said quietly. "You're doing this because I said no." His eyes hardened. Behind him, Emily heard me. So did Lisa. So did Robert. And as I walked out of that courtroom, I realized something important. The judge had not saved me yet. The truth had not fully come out yet. But Jason's perfect mask had cracked. And once a mask cracks in court, every question becomes dangerous. The second hearing felt different before it even began. At the first hearing, Jason had walked into court wearing sorrow like a pressed suit. He had looked prepared, noble wounded. Lisa had cried at the right moments. Their attorney had spoken in soft phrases about safety and protection. They had expected me to look small beneath the weight of their concern. But by the second hearing, concern had begun to look like strategy. Robert had filed our objection. He had submitted Dr. Brooks's preliminary findings, Linda Parker's statement, Pastor Elaine's letter, and the credit union warning. Jason and his attorney had received copies, and I could tell from the way Jason avoided my eyes that he had not expected my quiet life to contain so many witnesses. That morning I arrived with Robert, Linda, and Pastor Elaine. Emily was already there. She sat in the back row alone, twisting the strap of her purse around her fingers. Jason sat 3 rows ahead of her with Lisa. He turned once, said something under his breath, and Emily looked down at her lap. I felt the old mother instinct rise in me, even though Emily was not my child. I wanted to go to her, put a hand on her shoulder, and tell her she could leave if it was too much. Robert seemed to read my mind. "Let her choose," he murmured. So I did. I let her choose. Judge Patricia Coleman entered and the courtroom stood. The sound of shoes against the floor benches, creaking papers, shifting, it all seemed louder than it should have been. I sat with my hands folded over a folder in my lap, feeling the hard edge of my notebook through the cardboard. Jason's attorney began by trying to minimize the documents Robert had submitted. Mr. Whitaker called Linda's statement neighborly loyalty. He called Pastor Elaine's letter well-meaning but limited. He said the cognitive evaluation was preliminary and did not account for fluctuating behavior observed in family settings. Fluctuating behavior. That was how they explained away competence. If I looked well, it was temporary. If I spoke clearly, I was having a good moment. If I made sense, the illness was simply hiding. Robert stood when it was his turn. "Your Honor," he said, "the petitioner has offered selected moments and interpretations. We intend to show a broader pattern not of decline by Mrs. White, but of pressure by the petitioner." Jason's face tightened. The first witness called was Linda Parker. Linda walked to the witness stand like she was heading into a church committee meeting she intended to dominate. She gave her oath, clearly sat straight, and looked directly at the judge. Robert asked how long she had known me. 15 years, Linda said. Long enough to know the difference between a forgetful afternoon and a failing mind. A few people shifted on the benches. Robert asked about my daily functioning. Linda described seeing me drive garden, manage my home, attend church, bring in groceries, pay the lawn service, coordinate pantry rides, and remember small details about neighbors' families. Then Robert asked, "Did Jason White ever speak to you about his mother?" Linda's mouth tightened. "Yes." "What did he say?" "He told me Amanda had been under stress and might say strange things about family matters. He said not to worry if she seemed confused." Robert paused. "Had Amanda said anything strange to you before that conversation?" "No." "Had you observed confusion?" "No." "What did you think of Jason's warning?" Mr. Whitaker stood. "Objection. Calls for speculation." Judge Coleman looked at Linda. "You may answer based on your own impression, not speculation." Linda leaned slightly toward the microphone. I thought he was trying to make sure I doubted her before she ever spoke. The room went silent. I did not look at Jason. I did not need to. I could feel his anger from across the aisle. Mr. Whitaker cross-examined Linda with polished patience. He asked whether neighbors saw everything. He asked whether I might behave differently behind closed doors. He asked whether she was trained to diagnose dementia. Linda let him finish. Then she said, "I'm not diagnosing anyone. I'm telling you what I saw." And what I saw was a woman managing her life and a son trying to manage her reputation. I wanted to applaud. I did not, of course. But Linda knew. She glanced at me as she stepped down and her eyes said, "Hold steady." Pastor Elaine testified next. She was gentle but firm. She described my work at the pantry, the lists I maintained, the families I remembered, the way I handled donated items and schedule changes. Then, she told the court, Jason had called her too. He asked that I contact him if Amanda made claims about family conflict, Pastor Elaine said. Robert asked, "Did that concern you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because when an adult asks a pastor to report another adult's private concerns to him, especially without that person's consent, that is not pastoral care. That is control." Lisa lowered her head. Jason whispered something to his attorney. Then came the credit union matter. Robert called Marcy, the representative from First Ohio Credit Union, by video testimony. She confirmed that someone had attempted to access information related to my account by phone, claiming to assist an elderly mother. The caller had personal identifying information, but failed the security question. Mr. Whitaker objected that no one could prove the caller was Jason. Robert did not argue. Instead, he asked Marcy, "Was Mrs. White notified?" "Yes." "Did she respond appropriately?" "Yes. She contacted us promptly and added enhanced security protections." Robert turned slightly toward the judge. "So, when presented with a potential financial threat, Mrs. White took rational protective steps." Marcy nodded. "Yes. Rational protective steps, not paranoia, not confusion." I held those words inside me like a match flame. Then Robert called Jason again. This time, Jason looked less polished. His tie was still straight, his suit still expensive, but the calm had begun to thin around the edges. Robert approached with a document in hand. "Mr. White, you testified that you did not seek guardianship for financial reasons, correct?" "Correct." You also testified that any discussion of selling your mother's house was only hypothetical and related to future care. Yes. Robert placed a photograph on the display screen. It was Emily's photo of Jason's desk. The folder label was visible. Amanda White guardianship petition draft. Jason stared at it. Robert asked, "Is this your desk?" Jason swallowed. "It appears to be. Is that your folder?" "Yes. Did you prepare a guardianship petition before discussing guardianship openly with your mother?" Jason shifted. "I was gathering information. That wasn't my question." Mr. Whitaker stood. "Your Honor," Judge Coleman raised one hand. "The witness may answer." Jason's jaw flexed. "Yes, I had begun preparing." Robert clicked to the next image. Mom assets, house value, savings estimate, pension, insurance, possible sale timeline. A quiet murmur passed through the room. Robert said, "Is this your handwriting?" Jason hesitated too long. "Yes, you made a list of your mother's assets for planning purposes. What kind of planning for her care?" Robert clicked to another image. The email from Kevin Marsh appeared. "If this becomes available after court clearance, I can move fast. Older homes in that area are getting strong investor attention." Jason's face reddened. Robert's voice stayed calm. "Who is Kevin Marsh?" "A real estate contact." "Why was a real estate contact discussing investor interest in your mother's home before you had authority over it?" Jason looked at the judge, then at his attorney. "It was preliminary." "Preliminary to what?" "To understanding options." Options for whom Jason's mouth opened, then closed. The courtroom went still again. Robert did not press further. He had made the point. Then Mr. Whitaker tried to repair the damage. On redirect, he asked Jason if selling the house would only happen if necessary for care. "Of course," Jason said. He asked if Jason had ever intended to personally profit. No. He asked if Jason loved his mother. Jason looked toward me, eyes shining now with either tears or anger. "Maybe both." "Yes," he said. "I love her. That's why this has been so painful. It should have hurt. But by then, the word love had been used so often as a weapon that it no longer entered me the same way." Then Robert said, "Your Honor, we call Emily White." The room changed. Jason turned so sharply his chair creaked. Emily froze. Lisa whispered, "No." Robert had warned me this might happen, but still my heart dropped. I looked back at Emily, wanting to save her from the walk she now had to make. She stood slowly. Her face was pale, but she walked forward. When she passed Jason's table, he whispered something I could not hear. Emily flinched. Judge Coleman noticed. So did Robert. Emily took the oath, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert approached gently. "Emily, how are you related to the parties?" "Amanda White is my grandmother. Jason White is my father." "Do you understand that testifying today may be difficult?" "Yes." "Do you understand you must tell the truth?" "Yes." Robert kept his questions simple. He asked whether she had visited me during the weeks before the petition. She said yes. He asked whether I appeared confused during those visits. She said no. Then he asked what she had overheard. Emily's hands gripped the edge of the witness chair. "I heard my dad talking to my mom about the house," she said. Jason stared at her. "What did you hear?" Emily swallowed. "He said after the court agreed the house could be handled quickly." "What did you understand that to mean?" "That he wanted to sell it." Mr. Whitaker objected. Judge Coleman allowed the answer as Emily's understanding, but noted its limitation. Robert then asked about the text messages. Emily confirmed she had seen messages between Jason and Lisa discussing listing the house after court approval. She confirmed she had taken photos because she was worried. Then Mr. Whitaker began cross-examination. His voice was smooth, almost kind. "Emily, you love your grandmother, don't you?" "Yes." "And you've been spending more time with her lately?" "Yes." "Isn't it possible she influenced your view of your father?" Emily looked at me, then back at him. "No." "You're young. Family conflict is painful. Sometimes older relatives can unintentionally make younger people feel responsible for them." Emily's face changed. "She didn't make me responsible," she said. "But you felt responsible. Because he was lying." The words came out clear. Jason's face darkened. Mr. Whitaker stepped closer. "Or because your grandmother convinced you he was lying?" Emily shook her head. "No, I saw it myself." He lifted his eyebrows. "You took private photographs from your father's desk, correct?" "Yes." "Without permission?" "Yes." "Because Amanda asked you to?" "No." "Because she encouraged you?" "No." "Because you wanted to help her win?" Emily's voice trembled, but she did not break. "Because I wanted him to stop." The courtroom went silent. Mr. Whitaker had no more questions. As Emily stepped down, Jason leaned toward her and whispered, "You don't know what you've done." This time Judge Coleman heard him. "Mr. White," she said sharply, "you will not intimidate a witness in my courtroom." Jason went still. For the first time since this began, my son looked truly exposed. Not misunderstood, not noble, exposed. When the court recessed, Emily came straight to me. I stood and she fell into my arms like she had been holding herself together by thread. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I held her tight. "No, sweetheart," I said. "You told the truth." Across the aisle, Jason watched us with a face I had never seen before. Not guilt, not sorrow. Rage. And in that moment, I knew he was not finished, but I also knew something else. The courtroom had finally seen him blink. The day Robert played the voicemail, I learned that silence can be louder than shouting. It was the third court session, and by then the room no longer felt like a place where Jason controlled the story. The first hearing had belonged to him. The second had cracked him open. But the third felt like something else entirely, as if everyone had come knowing a hidden door was about to be opened. Jason sat beside Mr. Whitaker with his arms folded tightly. Lisa was there too, but she looked different now. Less tearful, more frightened. She kept glancing at Jason as if trying to measure how far she should stand from a fire before it burned her too. Emily sat behind me with Linda and Pastor Elaine. She had dark circles beneath her eyes, and I knew testifying had cost her something. After the last hearing, Jason had not spoken to her for 2 days. Then, he had sent one text, "I hope you're proud of yourself." She showed it to me with shaking hands. I told her the same thing I told myself. Truth feels cruel only to people who depend on lies, but saying that did not make it hurt less. When court began, Robert rose with a small digital recorder and a printed transcript. "Your Honor," he said, "we asked to introduce a voicemail left by Mrs. White at my office on November 29th before the guardianship petition was filed." Mr. Whitaker stood immediately. "Objection! Hearsay!" Robert answered calmly. "It is not being offered merely for the truth of every statement, Your Honor, but to establish Mrs. White's state of mind, timeline capacity, and contemporaneous awareness of the pressure she was experiencing. Additionally, portions may be relevant to the petitioner's conduct." Judge Coleman looked at the transcript. "I'll allow it for limited purposes at this stage. Proceed." My mouth went dry. Even though I had heard the voicemail in Robert's office, the thought of hearing it in court filled me with dread. My voice would not belong to me anymore once it filled that room. It would become evidence. It would be weighed, interpreted, challenged. Robert looked at me once before pressing play. A soft click. Then my voice emerged from the courtroom speakers. "Mr. Hayes, this is Amanda White. My husband was Charles White. You handled his will and the house documents after he passed. I'm sorry to leave this on a message, but I don't know who else to call." The room seemed to shrink around me. I heard my own fear. Not dramatic, not wild, just raw. "My son Jason White has been telling relatives that I am losing my mind. He has asked about putting his name on my house and my bank account. I refused. Since then, he and his wife Lisa have been telling people I'm forgetful and paranoid." Jason stared straight ahead. Lisa lowered her eyes. My voice continued trembling but clear. "Yesterday, he took me to Dr. Miller and brought a folder of things he claims prove I'm declining. I am not confused. Today is Wednesday, November 29th. It is 11:16 in the morning. I am in my home at 214 Maple Ridge Drive in Columbus. I know exactly what is happening." I felt Emily begin to cry behind me. I did not turn around. If I turned around, I would cry too. On the recording, I paused to breathe. Jason mentioned guardianship at a family dinner on Sunday. I believe he is trying to gain legal control over me and my property. "I'm scared, Mr. Hayes, not because I don't understand, because I do." That sentence landed differently in court than it had in Robert's office. I'm scared not because I don't understand, because I do. No one moved. Then the background sound came. A car door. Faint but clear. On the recording, my voice changed. Oh God. My body remembered that moment before my mind did, sitting at Charles's desk, seeing Jason's SUV. Panic rising in my throat. The voicemail continued. "Jason just arrived. I didn't know he was coming. Please call me back. Please don't call my son. My number is..." Then, farther from the phone, Jason's voice entered. "Mom." It was faint, but it was him. Jason's shoulders stiffened. Robert did not stop the recording. My recorded voice lowered. "Please call me back." Then Jason's voice closer now, sharp beneath the false casualness. "What are you doing in here?" A rustle. My voice. "This is my desk." Jason. It was Dad's desk. Me. And now it is mine. Another sound. Footsteps maybe, the creak of the office floorboard, Jason's voice again. "Who were you talking to?" My voice. "No one." Jason. "Mom." Me. I made a call. Jason. "To whom?" Me. That's private." There was a long pause on the recording, filled only by faint breathing and the hum of the old desk lamp. Then Jason said something that froze the courtroom. "Private calls are fine. I'm just asking because after yesterday I think we need to be careful about who you're talking to." Robert paused the recording. No one spoke. Judge Coleman looked at Jason. Jason's face had lost color. Mr. Whitaker was staring at the transcript as if hoping the words might rearrange themselves. Robert said, "Your Honor." The audio continues for several seconds. "Permission to proceed?" Judge Coleman nodded. Robert pressed play. My voice. "Careful, Jason. There are people who take advantage of seniors." My voice quieter but firm. "Yes, Jason. I'm beginning to understand that." "Jason, what does that mean?" Then came the sound of movement, a chair perhaps. My voice. "It means I don't need you walking into my house whenever you please." "Jason, you gave me a key." "Me for emergencies." "Jason, this is an emergency." "Me, no. This is you checking on me because you're afraid I called someone." The recording went quiet. Then Jason's voice dropped lower. "Did you—" That one question changed everything. Not because it was loud. It was not. Because it was afraid. The whole room heard it. Jason was not concerned in that moment. He was alarmed that I had reached beyond him. The recording continued with shifting sounds and muffled words. Then, Jason's voice again clearer than before. "Mom, I'm trying very hard not to take stronger steps." Robert stopped the recording there. The silence that followed was complete. Not courtroom quiet, not polite quiet. Truth quiet. The kind of silence that comes when everyone has just heard the same thing and knows pretending not to hear it would be another lie. Judge Coleman leaned back slowly. Mr. Whitaker stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner was under stress. This was a private family exchange, and the wording." Judge Coleman raised a hand. "Sit down, counsel." He sat. Robert stepped forward. "Mr. White," he said, "was that your voice on the recording?" Jason did not answer immediately. Judge Coleman looked at him. "Mr. White." Jason swallowed. "Yes, you entered your mother's home without invitation on November 29th. I had a key." That was not the question the judge said. Jason's jaw tightened. "Yes," Robert continued. "You asked who she was calling. I was concerned about scams. You told her you might take stronger steps." Jason leaned toward the microphone. "I don't remember the exact wording." Robert held up the transcript. "Would listening again help refresh your recollection?" Jason's face reddened. "No." "What stronger steps were you referring to?" "I meant getting her help." "Legal help?" "I meant family help." "Guardianship." Jason looked at Mr. Whitaker. Robert waited. Finally, Jason said, "It was one option." A murmur moved through the benches. Judge Coleman's eyes remained fixed on Jason. Robert asked, "So, before filing your petition, you entered your mother's home without invitation, questioned who she had contacted, and warned her you might take stronger steps after she refused to disclose a private call." "Correct." Jason's voice was tight. "That makes it sound worse than it was." Robert's answer was quiet. "I'm asking what it was." Jason said nothing. Then Lisa was called again. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Robert asked whether she knew Jason had gone to my house that morning. She said yes. He asked whether Jason had been concerned I might be contacting an attorney. She hesitated. Mr. Whitaker objected. Judge Coleman allowed the question. Lisa's eyes filled, but this time the tears did not look rehearsed. "He was worried she was getting outside advice," she said. Jason turned toward her sharply. Robert asked, "Outside advice from whom I don't know. Did he mention Mr. Hayes?" Lisa looked at the table. "Maybe." The word was almost a whisper. But it was enough. Jason's entire posture changed. He no longer looked like a devoted son. He looked like a man watching the ground collapse beneath him. Then Robert tied it together. He showed the court the dates. The voicemail, November 29th. The real estate email, December 1st. The guardianship consult on Jason's calendar, December 4th. The petition filed December 7th. The pattern was no longer invisible. I had called for help before Jason went to court. Jason had known or at least suspected I was seeking help. And then he had accelerated. When Robert sat down, Judge Coleman asked if I wished to say anything. I had not expected that. Robert turned to me, giving the smallest nod. I stood. My legs felt weak, but my voice was steady. "Your Honor, I said that voicemail is embarrassing for me to hear. I sound scared. I was scared. I am still scared. But I was not confused. I knew who I called. I knew why. I knew what my son was doing. And I knew that if I waited too long, someone else would be speaking for me. I looked at Jason then. He would not meet my eyes. "That is what I'm trying to stop." I sat down. Behind me, Emily was crying openly now. Linda handed her a tissue. The hearing ended shortly after with Judge Coleman saying she would review the evidence carefully before the next session. But everyone in that room understood that something final had shifted. Jason had spent weeks telling people my voice could not be trusted. Then my voice played through the speakers, frightened but clear, and proved the opposite. As we left the courtroom, Jason did not come near me this time. He stayed by the table staring at nothing, and I realized the voicemail had done more than expose him. It had brought me back into the room. The final hearing began with Jason looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Not physically. He was still tall, still broad-shouldered, still dressed in an expensive suit with polished shoes and a watch that caught the courtroom lights. But something inside him had shrunk. The confidence he had worn so easily at the beginning was gone. He no longer looked like a devoted son guiding his confused mother toward safety. He looked like a man trying to survive the truth. Lisa sat beside him, but there was space between them now. Not much, just a few inches on the bench. But I noticed it. A wife who had once leaned into his performance now sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed forward as if moving too close to him might pull her down too. Carol sat behind them with Mark and Susan. Carol would not look at me. Her face was pale, and for the first time since this began, she looked less judgmental than ashamed. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, and we all stood. My knees trembled, but I stood straight. Robert had warned me that today might not feel like victory even if the ruling went our way. Sometimes he had said the court can stop the legal harm, but it cannot undo the personal harm. He was right. A judge could deny Jason's petition. A judge could protect my rights. A judge could question his motives. But no judge could give me back the son I thought I had raised. Mr. Whitaker tried one last time. He argued that family conflict had clouded the issue. He said Jason had made mistakes under stress, but those mistakes did not erase his legitimate concern for his mother's welfare. He said the voicemail sounded troubling, yes, but should be understood in the context of a frightened son facing a frightening decline. A frightened son. I almost closed my eyes. Even now they were trying to turn his control into fear and my fear into illness. Then Robert stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Your Honor, he said this case began with a simple claim that Amanda White was no longer able to manage her life and that her son Jason White needed authority to protect her. But the evidence has shown something very different. He moved through the facts one by one. I had paid my bills. I had passed an independent cognitive evaluation. I had maintained volunteer duties. I had responded appropriately to a financial access attempt. I had documented events clearly. I had contacted legal counsel before Jason filed his petition. Jason, meanwhile, had asked about my deed, my accounts, my assets, my house value, and possible sale timelines. Robert turned toward the judge. Mrs. White was not confused about being pressured. She was correct. The words landed softly, but they filled the room. Correct. Not paranoid, not unstable. Correct. Jason's face tightened as if the word physically hurt him. Then Judge Coleman asked him a direct question. Mr. White, do you still believe your mother lacks capacity? Jason sat forward. Your Honor, I believe my mother needs help. That is not what I asked. His attorney touched his arm, but Jason pulled slightly away. I believe she is vulnerable, he said. Judge Coleman's expression did not change. Many adults are vulnerable in some ways. That does not justify guardianship. Jason swallowed. I was trying to prevent something bad from happening. Robert looked down at his papers, but I could feel him listening. Judge Coleman continued. Something bad such as what Jason's mouth opened. No answer came. Because the bad thing, the real bad thing, was not a scammer or a fall or an unpaid bill. It was me saying no. Finally, he said, financial mistakes, unsafe decisions. Like changing her locks after you entered without invitation. Jason's face flushed. Like refusing to give you access to accounts after you requested it. Silence. Like contacting an attorney after you raised guardianship. Still silence. Judge Coleman leaned back. I have heard enough. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Judge Coleman began slowly. Guardianship is a serious remedy. It removes rights from an adult. It is not a tool for family convenience inheritance planning, property management, or resolving disagreement between parent and child. Jason lowered his eyes. The judge continued. The evidence does not support a finding that Amanda White lacks capacity to manage her personal or financial affairs. The independent evaluation does not support it. The testimony of those who observe her regularly does not support it. The financial records do not support it. My breath caught. Linda reached for my hand beneath the table. Judge Coleman looked at Jason. What the evidence does suggest is that Mr. White pursued legal authority while also discussing property value, asset control, and possible sale of the proposed ward's home. The court finds those facts deeply concerning. Lisa covered her mouth. Carol began to cry silently. Judge Coleman's voice remained firm. The petition for guardianship is denied. Denied. One word. That was all it took for the cage Jason had built around me to collapse. My body reacted before my mind did. I did not cheer. I did not smile. I simply bent forward slightly as if some enormous weight had been lifted off my shoulders and I had forgotten how to stand without it. Robert placed a steady hand on the table. Linda squeezed my fingers so hard it hurt. Judge Coleman continued. Additionally, given the financial issues raised during these proceedings, the court will refer the matter for appropriate review regarding attempted account access and any misuse of confidential financial or estate information. Jason's head snapped up. Your Honor, Mr. White, she said sharply. Do not interrupt this court. He sat back. For the first time in my life, I watched my son have no power in a room. The hearing ended shortly after. People stood slowly as if no one quite knew what to do after the truth had become official. Carol approached me first. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. Amanda, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I looked at her and for a moment anger rose in me so hot I almost could not breathe. I wanted to ask why sorry came only after a judge said I was worth believing. I wanted to ask why my word had not been enough when Jason first started planting doubts. But she was an old woman too, and grief had made fools of many people, so I said I needed you sooner. She flinched. I know, she said. That was all. Emily came next. She walked straight into my arms, crying so hard her shoulders shook. It's over, she whispered. I held her tightly. The court part is over. She pulled back and looked at me, understanding immediately. Because the legal battle had ended, but the family wound had not. Jason stood near the aisle watching us. His face had lost its anger now. In its place was something almost worse. Self-pity. He came toward me slowly. Robert shifted beside me, but I touched his arm. It's all right. Jason stopped a few feet away. Mom, he said. I looked at him. For weeks, I had imagined this moment. I thought I might scream. I thought I might ask him how he could do this. I thought I might list every wound, every lie, every humiliation. But when he stood there, defeated and exposed, all I felt was tired. I'm sorry, he said. The words should have mattered. They didn't, because his eyes kept flicking toward Robert, toward the judge's bench, toward the relatives nearby. He was sorry in front of witnesses, sorry after losing, sorry because his plan had failed, not sorry because he had broken his mother's heart. I held out my hand. He looked confused. The spare key, I said. His face changed. Mom. The key. Jason. For a second, I thought he would refuse. Then he reached into his pocket and placed the old brass key in my palm. It was warm from his hand. I closed my fingers around it. That key had once meant trust, emergency, family, love. Now it felt like evidence returned. Jason's voice cracked. Are you really going to shut me out? I looked at the man who had tried to shut me out of my own life. No, I said quietly. I'm going to let myself back in. He had no answer. I walked past him with Emily on one side and Linda on the other. Outside, the winter air hit my face cold and clean. The courthouse steps were slick with frost, so I moved carefully. Not because I was incapable, because I valued my footing. At the bottom of the steps, I turned back once. Jason was still inside the glass doors, blurred by reflection, standing alone. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free. And freedom, I learned that day, can still hurt when you have to win it from someone you love. When I returned home from court, the house was waiting for me exactly as I had left it. That surprised me. After everything that had happened, some part of me expected the world to look different. I expected the porch to feel brighter, the rooms to feel larger, the winter air to feel lighter. But the maple tree still stood bare in the front yard. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee. Charles's old jacket still hung on the hook in the mudroom because I had never found the courage to move it. Victory did not arrive like music. It arrived like quiet. Linda walked in behind me, carrying my purse, my court folder, and a casserole Pastor Elaine had insisted I take home. You need to eat, Linda said. I'm not hungry. I didn't ask if you were hungry. I almost smiled. Emily came later that afternoon. She knocked softly, then let herself in after I called out. She looked exhausted, but when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, she smiled in a way that broke my heart. You're home, she said. Yes, I whispered. I'm home. She crossed the room and hugged me. Neither of us said anything for a long time. That evening, after Linda and Emily left, I walked through every room alone. I touched the back of the sofa. the dining table, the hallway wall where Jason's height marks still lived in pencil beneath the paint. I stood in the laundry room and looked at those little lines. Age 6, age 9, age 13. Charles had written them joking that Jason would outgrow the roof if we kept feeding him. I touched the highest mark with 2 fingers. For a moment I grieved the boy. Not the man who lied in court, not the man who tried to take my house. The boy who once ran through this hallway in socks, who cried when his goldfish died, who asked me to check for monsters under his bed. People like to say, betrayal turns love into hate. It doesn't always. Sometimes betrayal leaves love standing in the middle of the room with nowhere to go. The next morning, I called Earl the locksmith again and had him check every lock, every window latch, every door. Then Robert helped me update my legal documents. I changed emergency contacts. I added written instructions that no one could access my accounts without my direct consent. I removed Jason from every place where trust had once been assumed instead of protected. Each signature hurt. Each one also healed. Robert asked if I wanted to pursue anything further against Jason. There were possible investigations, financial questions, maybe more legal consequences if records proved he had attempted unauthorized access. I don't want revenge, I told him. Robert nodded. Protection is not revenge. So we proceeded carefully. Not because I wanted to destroy my son, but because I had finally understood that mercy without boundaries can become permission. A week after the ruling, a letter arrived from Jason. I recognized his handwriting immediately. For nearly an hour, I left it unopened on the kitchen table. Then I made tea, sat down, and slid my finger under the flap. Mom, I know things got out of hand. I was scared and under pressure. Lisa and I only wanted what was best, but I can see now that maybe I pushed too hard. I hope someday you understand I never meant to hurt you. You're still my mother and I love you. Jason, I read it twice. Then I placed it beside my cup and stared out the window. There was no real confession in it. No naming what he had done. No mention of the voicemail, the lies, the court petition, Emily's pain, the way he had made relatives doubt me. Just soft words arranged around responsibility without ever touching it. Things got out of hand. Maybe I pushed too hard. I never meant to hurt you. I took out a sheet of stationery from Charles's desk and wrote back. Jason, I received your letter. I believe you are sorry for how things ended. I do not yet believe you understand what you did. You did not simply push too hard. You told people I was losing my mind. You tried to take legal control of my life. You discussed my home as if it were already yours to handle. You used concern as a way to silence me. I am not writing this to punish you. I am writing it because I will no longer soften the truth to protect you from it. For now, I need distance. Do not come to my house without an invitation. Do not contact my bank, my doctor, my attorney, my church, or my neighbors about me. If we rebuild anything, it will happen slowly, honestly, and with respect. I will always love the child I raised. But I must protect the woman I am. Mom, I cried after writing it. Then I mailed it anyway. Emily continued visiting. At first, she seemed guilty every time she laughed in my kitchen, as if joy itself were disloyal to her father. Slowly, that changed. We baked lemon cookies one Saturday, and she burned the first batch because she was telling me about a difficult nursing exam. I teased her. If you treat patients like you treat cookies, I'm worried. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. That sound did something good to the house. It reminded the walls that not everything Jason touched stayed broken. Carol came by in January. She brought flowers and an apology that was awkward and perfect, but real. I should have asked you, she said. Instead, I listened to him. Yes, I said. She cried. I let her. Forgiveness, I learned, does not always mean opening the door wide again. Sometimes it means unlocking one small window and seeing what kind of air comes through. I also joined a support group at the Senior Center for Older Adults who had faced financial manipulation or family coercion. The first night, I almost turned around in the parking lot. I felt ashamed walking in as if being betrayed by my own son meant I had failed as a mother. But inside that room were women and men with stories that sounded painfully familiar. A daughter who took over bill payments and drained an account. A nephew who pressured an aunt to sign a deed. A grandson who used love to demand access. A husband's children who called a widow confused when she refused to sell. I was not alone. That realization hurt, but it also strengthened me. When it was my turn, I said, my son told the family I was losing my mind. Then my lawyer played my voicemail in court. The room went quiet, not with judgment, with recognition. I kept going. By spring, the maple tree began to bud again. Tiny green leaves appeared first soft and stubborn against the cold mornings. I stood on the porch with coffee in my hands and watched them open day by day. One afternoon, Emily joined me. Grandma, she said, do you ever wish none of it happened? I looked at the tree, at the yard, At the house Charles and I had built a life inside. Yes, I said. Every day. She leaned against the porch railing. But I don't wish I stayed silent. She nodded. That was the truth I carried forward. I did not get my old family back. Not completely. Some relationships remained cracked. Some apologies never came. Jason and I did not become close again by magic. Healing was not a reunion scene with music swelling in the background. Healing was quieter. It was changing locks. It was writing boundaries. It was letting Emily laugh in my kitchen. It was going to church without wondering who believed Jason. It was opening my own mail. It was standing in my living room at night and no longer feeling like I needed permission to exist there. The real victory was not keeping the house. It was keeping myself. And after almost losing my voice to someone who called control love, I promised I would never again confuse being doubted with being wrong. Sometimes the hardest battles are not fought against strangers, but against the people whose voices once made us feel safe. Amanda's story reminds us that love without respect can become control, and concern without honesty can become a cage. It is painful to admit that someone we raised, trusted, or sacrificed for may use our age, our grief, or our kindness against us. But this story also reminds us of something powerful. Being doubted does not mean we are wrong, and being afraid does not mean we are weak. Amanda did not win because she was loud. She won because she kept the truth alive, one note, one memory, one brave choice at a time. Her real victory was not just saving her house, it was saving her voice. It was learning that boundaries are not cruelty, that protection is not revenge, and that we are never too old to stand up for ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to defend your truth when no one believed you? I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what lesson you're taking with you tonight. And if you believe stories like this can help someone feel less alone, please subscribe and stay with our family here.